I've muted myself. We are outside of the normal watch hours, but glad that we are actually doing this. So I hope that you are doing well, that you got yourself like a cup of tea or something as I try to hide wires. And we're gonna hang out. The Discord is gonna be up soon. I will be in the Discord voice channel. Working on connecting to the voice channel, connecting my mic. And then also I'll drop in the eCam call in if anybody wants to call in. Okay, I think we're connected there. Yes, we are. Okay. Hey, look, Nick, you can call in, dude. Like, if you want to, do it, man. I'll drop the link, and you can call in. I don't really have anything, like, seriously planned. So I'll drop the link if you're going to go live. Let's do it. I'm about to pin it. No problemo. I was going to use, I actually generated the stream via StreamYard because I was like, I'll give it a go. I guess not. And the reason I guess not is because it keeps telling me that my connection is bad, which is the stupidest thing on the planet. It's good enough for this. It's good enough for everything else I do because I'm hardwired in. But StreamYard, for some reason, thinks the connection's not good enough. And it drops the quality of the stream. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go via eCam. So, not caring. I do have a tea in front of me. The tea, it's a herbal tea, but I have mixed and matched it with some breakfast tea. And but the herbal aspect of the tea is brought to me from the mountains of Armenia, which is great, in my official Liverpool mug. We're just chilling. I'm not drinking my mate today. I haven't had any mate today because I've been on the road and it was just like inconvenient. But I do have my Japanese tea kettle. Yes, I am that cool. Spread the word, folks. Let's all kick it and hang out. Cheers. I added it. I'm trying to something new. Check this out. That's a different view of the office and what's going on. Some of you guys actually might like this view a lot more. I'm trying to convince myself to like this view a lot more. I'm not sure. Maybe it is a better view. You guys tell me. It's a bit darker. That's because I'm figuring out the lenses, and they don't have the same lens. So I don't know what's going on with the color. Maybe I can fix that. God doesn't want Arthur to use StreamYard. That's funny. And yeah, this is an interesting angle, right? You get to see it's not obviously as focused. The background's not blurred in regards to that. And then obviously it's not as green for some reason. I have no idea. I mean, the room is green because I got a green light shining on me. The thing is that I don't know why this mic is not this camera is not picking up that color. So I don't know, man. I got friends for this kind of stuff. So if they're watching, you know who you are. I need your help. I added a third shelf. So now I have 1, 2, 3. I'm enjoying those. I like them a lot. Just get to stack books on the wall. Not bad. And this is, here we are, folks. Look at me. So I thought, let's try around. Let's mess around here and see what's going on. You guys tell me what you think about these camera angles. I mean, the tea kettle just kills it. That's funny, but I like this. I like this a lot. Oh, look at Jerome. He's like, I don't know what to think. It's just again, it's a lot darker because it's not sucking in as much light. I can change that around, but for the time being, this is the best I can do. I don't know. I like this, man. Jerome doesn't like this angle. I like it a lot. I know it seems like the room is bigger. I might just. The thing is that. Nice sweater. Thanks. You can actually see my sweater instead of right. Instead of you can't see my sweater. No, you can. Thank you. There's pros and cons. I think there's pros and cons to both of them. Here we are. I don't know. I feel like I can be more relaxed at this angle. I feel like I can be more relaxed. I've invited you to my office. You're sitting across from it. We're having tea together, and we're talking. It's those podcasty stuff. We can just have like normal conversations with each other. Where the other one, I feel like I'm like a news reporter or something like that. But we will see. It's just this camera that I'm using right now has to be at one point or another. It needs to have a multiple function to it because of my other set that I'm setting up. It has to have the ability to be turned around and used for the other shot. Once I get the mic and stand and stuff like that set up for that, so we can have in-house friends to have conversations with. I don't mind it. Cheers. Hey, this came from England. This came from the land of Jerome. At least that's what they told me. What's up, David? How you doing? Hey, David, I was watching portions of a conversation that you were a part of. It was very interesting. Very, very interesting. I feel like I could be more relaxed like this. David has been found out. I don't know what that means, but that's fine. Saying it was a pretty intense conversation between folks. How come those folks don't come to my channel? Do I want those folks on my channel? It's a good question. Again, Discord is open. You're more than welcome to call me on Discord. And also, Ecamm, the link is dropped in there. If you want to call via Ecamm, you can as well. Do the news anchor camera switch. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate having you. And we will go to our reporter, investigative reporter at his desk. Well, hello. Thank you. You can tell I'm in a mood, huh? I should add that individuals that are a part of our Patreon community, the paid individuals, so anywhere $5 and up, you are more than welcome to join us for our Bible studies on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We had ours today. I actually took like a 30-minute break after that Bible study. We're going through the book of Ecclesiastes. Go check out our Patreon, guys. Become a patron, folks. There it is. Go to patreon.com/Apologia Center and become a patron. Have you guys heard of The Line? Those atheists are hostile. I think this is what used to be called the Atheist Experience, right? With Matt Dillahunty and those guys. I think they changed the name to The Line. They just changed their name. They're the same folks. Hey, what do you guys call reporters? Oh yeah. We got our guest who got ready. The man put his kids to bed real quickly, and now he's joining us. Nice hat, dude. I'm feeling it. I can't rock. You know, I used to wear a hat like that, but I don't anymore.
How's it going? Am I coming through okay? I've had issues with this mic.
Yeah, you still have them, it seems like. I don't know. So there's a lag.
I unplugged it. Let's see if that works better.
There's just a lag between your camera and your mic.
Gotcha. So I could do two things. I can turn the mic off or turn the camera off and go with this camera, or whichever you prefer.
It's on you, dude. It's I would prefer to see you. Okay, now you're frozen. There you are. Okay,
there we go.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, I would prefer to see you.
Right on. Well, am I coming through a little better this time?
Yeah, it's all good. Hang on, let's see what do we want to do here. We're gonna do this. There we go. You know, I like this. I can just chill.
Yeah,
I'm trying to mess around with these camera views here and see what's best. Folks, if you are not familiar with the gentleman that is sitting to my right, to which side of he's sitting to you, I have no idea. To my right. No, to my left. Well, to my right. Whatever. Camera angles are funny, and then if you mirror them, they do all sorts of crazy stuff. You forget what side you are. That's my left hand. That's my right hand. You're working on your dissertation.
Very, very slowly. And sorry for the grody-ness. When you put a child to bed, it is like wrestling.
I have no idea what grody means.
Sticky. Yeah.
Oh,
I look like I've been running a marathon, but basically, once you put a kid to bed, if you're successful, you come out looking like this.
look, man.
So,
I was listening to something on the road today with my son, and I was thinking to myself, um, the individual who's really awesome, good guy. He was recommending a lot of stuff, and I was like, dude, I wish I could have read all those books. Like he's recommending all these books, and I haven't read. I think I'd read maybe one of them, and I was like, oh, I wish I could have read all those books. And then I kind of looked over to my son, my oldest son. I was dropping him off at an event with his teammates, and I was like, but I have children. That was the thought that really hit me. I was like, dude, I have kids, and which means you can't read as many books. And then I had kind of a reflective moment. And I have these reflective moments often. Every time I have an idea to do something crazy, I kind of think to myself, is it worth losing time with my kids to do whatever it is that I want to do? And generally the answer is no, it's not. And that helps me answer questions really quickly. It really does. And so, yes, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you getting all sweaty or putting your kids to sleep. They want to wrestle you at the middle of the night, and that's fun, man. Like that's cool. That's like, to me, that is worth.
that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's worth much more than gold.
Mm-hmm.
If I can put it that way.
No, exactly. And specifically this one, learning his math, learning his reading. Like he's reading all sorts of stuff right now, and I'm just at this point. I'm like, I was eating paint and rocks as a kid, and he's doing math.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to keep up with it. I mean, I don't know. You've seen my setup a little bit. You
Yep.
see all the books, like this whole thing here is books. That release, that's major dissertation. That's major dissertation. That's major dissertation. Then he comes in and starts moving stuff around. At the end of the day, I'm like, well, the earth is his playpen. I'm assuming that the world is the Lord's playpen. So I just keeps you humble, I suppose.
Yeah. It's interesting you were mentioning so my oldest son, so my first child, who's 9, says today, he was dressed up and we didn't like the way he was dressed, and I was like, dude, like, dress yourself better. And he goes, it's not my fault I can't dress better. My daughter, who's 2 years younger, 7-year-old, goes, it is your fault. I was very proud because she said, you just said it is not my fault I can't dress myself.
And this is why free will is so important.
Dude, and the logic was impeccable. And I told him, I was like, hey, she caught you, man. That's pretty contradictory, you know? You're standing there saying it's not my fault I can't do such a thing. That seems problematic. And it's very interesting because he's like way better at math and chess and strategy and stuff like that. And she does this regularly. And then he told me in the car, he said, she takes after your genes. So like, that means she's got a philosophical bent to her. I'll take that all day.
You look at him and go, you mean she's smart?
Well, yeah, he's a pretty intelligent dude. He's read, I think he's like he's probably 500 pages into the 4th Harry Potter book, and that's like, he's done that over the last 2 months. He's read that much, book 1 to finishing this one. So
awesome.
Yeah. So when you were talking about I was eating paint and stuff like that, yeah, I was not reading I was reading at 9 years old, and I was reading Armenian stuff because I was in Armenia. But like this dude is a reader, which is really cool. So what fun stuff have you been working on that you might want to?
Well, I got the feedback from, I have 2 supervisors. I have a primary and a secondary. Their opinion is equal in terms of weight given, but one of them basically can override the other is kind of the idea. The one, Mike Bird, basically said, this is great. Imagine if the person you're criticizing is one of the guys who will determine whether or not he passes you is reading your dissertation. I'm like, I know exactly which line, i.e., which footnote that Mike read. Not to get too sassy about it, but it's I'm not going to pull the book up. It's under other books. But the argument basically, as I explained it to Mike, was some of the major scholars in this, or at least in this kind of field or subdivision of things that we're arguing over, basically is pulling a 1970s post-liberal reading, basically kind of the canon within a canon sort of reading. Well, yeah, Paul says this, Paul says that, but this one seems to fit better with my denomination, my Ivy League institution, this one fits my values better. So this here just kind of, is how, and that's putting it crassly, but that's kind of the mindset of it. And you put that in the realm of universal salvation, right? So, well, we got these texts here, so we'll just boom. When traditionally the opposite has been, well, we got these texts here, so boom. There's not been an integrative reading, or at least that's what my dissertation hopefully does, is integrate these two kind of streams of texts instead of just kind of, reducing one or ignoring one.
So it's something very unique you're working on, because I've heard around the internet, this stuff get thrown around. And we've spoken about it a little bit, but I think it's something that it should be addressed. So you mentioned universalism, and usually when people hear that, the panic kicks in. What is it that we're really talking about here in regards to what kind of universalism is it? Because there are different kinds of universalism. There's something that is called Christian universalism. I have a name for it. It's kind of a snarky name, which is Calvinism on crack, but because
Calvinism taken to its logical conclusion, perhaps.
Maybe so.
Or if you see, well, you can't see. Well, up there is Karl Barth, and so if you're
correct,
if you prefer Karl Barth, who was and was not a universalist, it really depends on which interpreter you read. To echo Bart Ehrman's famous thing about the Gospels, but basically when I'm not engaging with kind of the John Hick kind of history of religions, all roads lead to God sort of thing. I think most people in this modern day and age are actually kind of disgusted by that.
Yeah, they clearly understand it's contradictory. All roads will not do that.
Or it does even worse. It doesn't vibe with the liberal values a lot of people kind of now intuitively have. It was like hermeneutical colonization, right? It's like, you're flattening out the distinctives of my faith. How dare you be a colonizer or this and this? And I mean, I'm not fond of the language, but I'm
that's liberalism that gets exported.
Exactly.
Is ideological colonialism.
Yep. And so I'm not talking about that. I think most people kind of intuitively are kind of, those are the people that make that sort of argument have never been in actual debate with someone who disagrees with them fundamentally. It's a very safe position from across the spectrum. I think most progressives in their bones recognize that, or progressives, liberals, evangelicals, so on and so forth. Then there's kind of the mainline universalism of kind of, you might say like a Barth or kind of a Douglas Campbell or Beverly Gaventa, people who aren't kind of beholden to evangelicalism, kind of the more textual or biblicist, or I'm not using the language of inerrancy, but kind of that scripture is, has a more authoritative role. Scripture, ideally done rightly, dictates the questions we ask, and so on and so forth. Their concern is more that kind of post-liberal reading of, well, you have this unique vision that Paul gives: in Christ all will be made alive, justification and life for all. Those sorts of texts. And so they prioritize those texts, and also, theological argumentation. So it's not like they're just, immune to that. And so I'm engaging with that school, within the apocalyptic school right there. And then you've got the evangelical, or you might say I prefer the term more orthodox universalism that looks at the destruction text or the hell texts, not to give you tilt too much in what direction I think those hell texts represent, but, the judgment texts of sorts. And then you get folks that try to integrate them in a way that is complementary versus committing themselves to that post-liberal sat critic, kind of subordination of one set of text to the other. That'd be like your Robin Parry's, or Gregory MacDonald, as he wrote under a pseudonym,
Mm.
and stuff like that. That's the majority of universalistic scholars are probably closer to Campbell than they are Perry. And so when you read a universalist, it's fair to say, or understand or engage with the universalist, expect more of a mainline versus an evangelical. Still Christian, still committed to the big Christian vision, but has a very specific goal in mind with that.
And this gets tied into a number of the church fathers.
Some church fathers, yeah. Usually, the argumentation, and I'm one of the things I hope to present at ETS, the regional ETS this year, on this is it's almost exclusively Paul, and specifically my dissertation focuses on Paul, so I'm feeding into that, obviously. But if you look at the historical Jesus, just taking what your average critical scholar says, he certainly was not a universalist. You take John, and interpreting John in the most critical sort of way, historical criticism, John certainly was a universalist. Peter certainly wasn't a universalist. And you kind of go through the whole gamut of things.
Are you saying certainly wasn't or was?
Certainly was not. Then you get to then Paul, and I think your most critical scholar will admit, well, Paul says contradictory things. Your Eugene Borings, your Richard Bells, people that have written on the topic, will say, hey, look, over here, Paul says these people will go into eternal destruction. Then over here, you have justification and life for all. Clearly, Paul's not a systematic theologian, and it all just depends on the lens you have. And I'm being reductionistic when I say that, just to make a point. And so my response is to acknowledge, yeah, Paul does seem to say contradictory things, and I'm contradictory things in air quotes. How can you say that justification of life for all is a true text? It's not. There's no hidden meaning there, so to speak. But also do the same with the hell texts or the judgment texts. It won't do, as Douglas Campbell does, basically say, I'm not going to touch the hell texts. They just need to be kind of redeployed, And I'm like, well, as someone who is sympathetic to kind of mainline Christianity, although certainly not mainline, that is so profoundly unsatisfying that that's what's driving my dissertation is, no, I'm not going to do the Becker and all that sort of stuff where it's like, hey, Paul's just not a systematic theologian. He's coherent, but he's not a systematician. I'm like, systematician doesn't mean, or rather I should say, if Paul's coherent, he's not going to say A and not A. He may have different reasons for saying different things, but he's not going to flat out contradict himself. He's not, let's assume that Paul is an intelligent thinker. And so the hope of the dissertation is to be fair to Paul's Second Temple Jewish contexts. From what I've seen, there's very little evidence for universal salvation. All people going to heaven through Christ. And of course, they wouldn't say through Christ because they're not Messianic Jews or anything. But through Messiah or through the work of Yahweh or through adherence to the law or whatever. The vision of universalism in Second Temple Jewish texts is very, very minimal. Usually it has an ethnic, kind of Jew-centric component to it versus a cosmic plus individualistic component. And so then I'm like, well, if that's the case, then Paul is either doing something radically new, which I'm perfectly open to, or I'm not sure where to go with that. It's like either Paul's creating something out of whole cloth, or he is the first of his kind to really argue this point or argue this way. And that boils down to 3 points, if I can make them. I would gloss this as like SUD, soteriological universal determinism, or Calvinism, or Bardian Calvinism, right? Yeah. So soteriological, obviously, Christ died to set us free from sin, right? Then universal, maybe like a Colossians 1, he's reconciled all things in Christ. And then D, if you take the Calvinist reading of, say, Ephesians 1:4 or Romans 8, those sorts of texts, maybe 1 John 2:2, he's the atoning sacrifice, not just for our sins, but for the sins of the whole world. You kind of put those 3 strands together, then universalism is just by logical necessity true. For me, the part I dispute is the D, the deterministic. I think Paul specifically, and other texts as well, but Paul specifically gives a lot more leeway to human agency and participation in faith that makes universalism at best indeterminate. Or at worst is, I think, very unlikely to be true given his emphasis on human agency. So that sounds very Wesleyan, and that's kind of where suspect I'll go, but I'm trying to keep an open mind to where the texts and issues may lead me. But in almost every single one of the Universalist texts, there is an undercurrent of human agency. You might say participation or cooperation, or to use a dirty word, synergy, um, or conditionality that renders those texts unlikely to be exhaustive in the SUD or soteriological deterministic sense. So it's part New Testament scholarship, part Second Temple Jewish scholarship, or attempting to be, and then part systematic or constructive theology. Hopefully those all merge together.
I got a question that's sort of off topic.
Sure.
There's an echo for some reason. Okay,
that might be me.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So this kind of came up in our Bible study today when we were looking at Ecclesiastes, and the idea was that the Old Testament doesn't teach an afterlife, or I'm making it broader here, because the claim was that it seems like the author of Ecclesiastes doesn't believe in an afterlife, because he makes references to essentially like, the lot of people and animals is the same; they all die. What is the dialogue? I guess the question is, clearly Sadducees and Pharisees disagree on this point. What kind of evidence do we have? What's the dialogue between scholars in that Second Temple period when it comes to the afterlife?
It's a good question. Being very general with what I say, you've got, so for example, in First Enoch, you have what clearly looks like blended imagery of eternal conscious torment, so i.e. a particularistic view of salvation. Not all people go to heaven.
Is this with the angels, sons of God, that are being
the sons
tormented?
of God, kind of, or the sons of God or the people. But Enoch uses, it's not inconsistent imagery because he's not writing systematic theology, but he paints a picture that if you're an advocate of, say, eternal torment, you can be, oh yeah, he's clearly utilizing that image in this scene or sequence. Yeah. Same thing goes with battle or war or destruction, or what we would use annihilation imagery. So he uses those kind of side by side. But if you look at, say, Wisdom of Solomon or Psalms of Solomon, there is no reference to torment in the afterlife. It's cessation of bodily life, which sounds more like Ecclesiastes. And then you have the debate in some Jewish texts, not all of them. Psalms of Solomon seems to indicate ambiguously on this point, but so do some of the Maccabean texts, the historical Jewish texts, that the wicked are not even raised at all. Like once you go into the grave, that's where you stay, and resurrection.
That's for the wicked. The wicked cease. Yes. So it's annihilationism.
Yeah, it's partial annihilationism. Yeah. The doctrine of annihilationism is you die, you're resurrected for judgment, and then you go back into the grave. And that's putting it crudely, but that's kind of the idea. Yeah. And there's actually a lot of Eugene Boring in one of his more well-known journal articles on the universal salvation language in Paul, and that was in Journal of Biblical Literature like probably 30, 40 years ago, basically said it's highly possible that Paul didn't believe that the wicked would even be raised in the first place. And Douglas Campbell actually admits that it's possible that, because Paul never gives, and I'm being careful with the language I'm using here, never gives positive evidence for the belief in a universal resurrection of wicked and righteous. I think he actually implies some of it in certain texts, but he doesn't give, we might say, a definitive, explicit, positive comment, which basically means if that's true, then universalism is a non-starter. Like, if the wicked aren't raised, either they're made righteous perfectly in a truly deterministic, Calvinistic, almost Platonic sense, or the wicked just go into death and that's it. You're just going to the grave and you're gone, kind of like the Ecclesiastes text. It really depends on the Jewish literature you read, because you can find all sorts of variegated images that, if you're looking for it, you can find evidence for your view. And that's not to say it's a right view or the best view, but
correct.
But yeah, Psalms of Solomon, Wisdom of Solomon are, you wouldn't say annihilationism because that's anachronistic, but the evidence of those texts certainly fits with that best. And so Ecclesiastes probably is closer to Daniel's vision of Daniel 12, the famous, they'll be held up as contempt and the righteous are raised. And then you have the parallel-ish text in Isaiah towards the end of Isaiah 66. Those slain by the Lord will be many, and the righteous will go out and see the base of the dead bodies. You know, their worm doesn't die, their fire is not quenched, and their abhorrence to all flesh. Kind of in that image, Isaiah is probably the most common image, if you're looking for similarity, of what first century Jewish or Second Temple Jewish literature or writers thought would happen to the wicked. You think Isaiah 66, 23 through 24, basically an apocalyptic battle, and not probably, as most people interpret, the book of Revelation, which has eternal torment for the beast, the false prophet, and those who go into the second death. And Paul, in my estimate, doesn't look anything like Enoch. He looks far more like Wisdom of Solomon or Isaiah 66, which means Paul, and most scholars grant this, Paul certainly didn't believe in eternal torment. Certainly is the way they would say it. I say probably didn't believe, which leaves you with either universal salvation or the utter termination of the wicked, the utter cessation of bodily existence. To try and tie all that together, if that makes sense.
It does. I want to ask a question. I don't know how to formulate it. I get what you mean. Obviously, when you're talking about Paul says this, and some people are suggesting that Paul contradicts himself and all this stuff.
I don't believe that.
I know.
I know. Some people say that.
Because that, for me, that has a direct correlation with what we view as how Scripture is inspired.
Yep.
Right. Like so immediately, like I don't mind saying like Johannine theology or Pauline theology or X, Y, and Z, the sort of stuff we use in scholarship when we think about it, when we want to kind of boil it down just to look at Luke in all the writings we have from Luke and how he presents, say, the kingdom of God, and then compare that to Matthew and see if how they fill in the gaps with one another and all that. Like, I think that's really fun and stuff like that. But it's obviously the case that some people actually think Paul does contradict himself and they just don't care because either they don't believe in God or they have a view of inspiration that's very different, or they actually will say Paul, but they don't mean Paul. They say this is Paul here and actually not Paul somewhere else. How do you kind of reason through that if you're doing that? You might not be doing that.
Yeah, no, and it's a good question. One, my supervisors would not let me get away with that if I actually believed it. So they would put the screws on me very, very tightly, and rightly so. One of the things is, and I made this point in the dissertation early on, is I accept all 13 letters as Pauline. I'm not 100% certain on the pastorals and in terms of authorship.
You've mentioned this before.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I'm reading a commentary now that by a linguist, like an expert in like linguistic theory and stuff, and I was probably 60-40 in favor of Pauline authorship, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, or that makes more sense, or this. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm 80-20, you know, okay. And so I was like, okay, this is really helpful. Okay, it's just stuff you don't know, you learn, it's so for me, all 13 letters are open for a conversation on that, which means unless Paul didn't write it, meaning like an interpolation or a gloss, something inserted that he did not pen, say, in Romans or Galatians or 1 Corinthians, then everything is fair game. And if Paul wrote all these letters, then they have equal weight in the sense of they have a voice to be listened to. If this is Holy Scripture, yeah, and Paul is speaking, if God is speaking through the Holy Spirit through Paul to us, then I can't go, well, I don't like the pastorals, I'm going to chuck them. That's just not, mentally, that's not where I've even been. Even like I started, when I went to Fuller, I went in with a 7-letter Pauline canon. Romans, Galatians, 1-2 Corinthians, Philemon, Philippians, and I'm missing 1 Thessalonians. Then after that, once I learned Greek and learned more, I came out of Fuller going like, yeah, I think Paul wrote all of them. I'm 50-50 on the pastorals. And that, just being honest, that yep, you learn stuff. And then now, like I said, I'm fairly firmly on the Pauline authorship canon. But at that point, I would have done probably what you said. So, well, here's what Paul says, and here's how Paul has been interpreted in the pastorals, which looking back, I'm uncomfortable with that. But that's where I felt I had to go just by nature of being honest with it. And so in churches, when I was engaged, I would have said, I don't think there's any evidence of this, and I hope there isn't because I would burn it. The author of, we're going through 1 Timothy 5 or something. I'd be the author says this, and that's not me being deceptive. That's me just being, that's what I believe.
I mean, look, every time I refer to Hebrews, it's the author said this.
Yep. And so it's just, for me, it's just a matter of trying to be consistent with that. But yeah, now that I think Paul wrote all 13 epistles, and with an exception of probably 4 or 5 verses throughout his whole corpus, every epistle has to be looked at. Every text has to be looked at. There's no text unless it's an interpolation or a later edition that Paul did not write. And we have a few of those. None relevant to the universalism debate. That means that what Paul says in 1 Timothy is equally applicable then to what he says in Romans 5 and vice versa. And that puts me to the right of Campbell, Gaventa, Becker, all these great interpreters, brilliant, and they're really brilliant. But that just means I get to go, well, there's more to Paul than you guys allow for, and how does that all function together? And so that's kind of how I try to approach it.
It's very interesting because you're not just dealing with theologians within your circle, let's just say. I mean, sometimes you work on something where you are just, by the nature of the research you're doing and the stuff you're working on, you're bound to deal with folks that you might disagree with, but generally you guys are in the same circles, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're working on stuff where it's not only outside of that circle. Let me just, for the audience, to kind of conceptualize. Suppose I'm writing on whether a person can apostatize, walk away from the faith. It could be that I argue against an Arminian or a Wesleyan who doesn't think you can apostatize. Suppose they think you're once saved, always saved. So that would be like a very near sort of thing. And that's a bit different than me arguing and writing and doing research with someone who is a Calvinist. And then somebody who's Reformed, and if you want to know the difference between those two, you got to look it up. Because you can be a Calvinist and not Reformed, right? We're using theological terminology here, obviously. And then you go out where you're talking to, use an expression there, someone like a Bart Ehrman, or anything of that sort, where they don't even believe the Bible is the Word of God. They might not think God exists, but they're biblical scholars. They're well known in the scholarship. They're well known in academia, and you're dealing with it. And it's very interesting because that challenges you in various ways, but even the way you approach it, because you guys share presuppositions. So I might be arguing against the Reform guy, but we share the presupposition that this is the Word of God we're dealing with, and it's inspired by God. Let's say it's infallible, and a number of those things, even Paul writing it, as opposed to me having a discussion with someone who's just like, no. It's just a piece of literature. It's the equivalent of me arguing with them over, Homer's Iliad. That's the interesting stuff.
Well, it's like you're seeing in debates on the millennium, right? Only, and I'm being silly when I say this, but I think people know what I mean. Only conservative Christians will have that debate because that is in the water that we all drink. You talk to a mainline theologian or biblical scholar or an agnostic or an atheist or whoever, they're going to be like, the question doesn't register because that's not how they think about the text. They don't come to the text with those lenses or that baggage, for better or worse. Whereas we're arguing about 3 or 4 verses in Revelation 20, and monographs are written and commentaries are written, and they're kind of looking at us going like, what that's a thing for you? And then, of course, you talk about other stuff that they care about, all sort of the rhetorical genius things about sexuality in Romans 1, like all the ingenious hermeneutical stuff that gets tossed there too. And we're kind of like, no, and so you can just see how the lenses we use and all of that are very important. But to your point, it's funny just because I'm having, there is, although I think I'm ahead of my time on this, and I'll say this here for everyone. Douglas Campbell wrote a book called Framing Paul. And it's like a 400-page book on Pauline chronology. Great book. Everyone should read it. Don't agree with half the stuff he says, but it's a great book. And one of the things he argues is that originally, he was in I call it the uncritical critical school, where you have a 7-letter Pauline corpus and everything else. That doesn't sound like Paul, chuck it. He came out basically saying, no, there's a 10-letter corpus, and the pastorals are closer to being Pauline than he previously thought. This is a guy at Duke Divinity School. This is not a slouch. This is not a fundamentalist or conservative scholar, although in the world of biblical scholarship, he's radical in some of the ways he gets to his centricity, if that makes sense. There's some stuff he'll do where I'm like, okay, wow. Whew. But then all the critical scholars, the historians of religion, the Bar Darwins, look at him and go, oh, what a raving fundamentalist. So it all depends on who you talk to. But he came out basically arguing for that, for a 10-letter Pauline corpus, and with a sympathetic eye toward the pastorals, which means that, and he's kind of one of the lead spokespeople of the apocalyptic school within Pauline theology or Pauline theological studies or biblical studies. And so his arguments are going to have to be reckoned with. And I think you also have a very liberal Roman Catholic scholar named Luke Timothy Johnson, who was at Emory University for a long time. He's recently retired. He wrote in his intro to New Testament and in his commentaries on the pastorals, argues very strongly for Pauline authorship of the contested Paulines. Those scholars are in the minority, but you no longer can just go, only fundamentalists believe Paul wrote 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. So me coming into this with, thinking, or at least being, I would say, favorable to Pauline authorship, just to hedge my bets, because, there could be a monograph that comes out tomorrow, means I'm actually engaging with stuff they've never engaged with, which I think is interesting. So it puts me at a very interesting place to be like, well, instead of dealing with the 7, because you've only got a few texts, my case is harder because I got to deal with the pastorals, Savior of all people, especially for believers. He's appeared for the salvation of grace of God, has appeared to bring salvation to all people. And so I'm like, I got to deal with more evidence now, which I think is fun. So for me, being conservative just makes the job more interesting, to be honest with you. Or I say evangelical. Conservative is a weird term these days, but broadly evangelical in my approach to scripture.
It's funny how these terms change and the way we have to redefine ourselves to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I used to call myself a charismatic when I was in Bible college. And that all that meant to me was, I believe in the charisma. I believe in the gifts.
Yep. Same here. I said the same thing.
All that meant. Nothing more, nothing less. Which is what now is being called a continuationist.
Yep.
But it's very interesting because now charismatic, and it's not because charismatic is it's just charismatic has a specific meaning now. And again, that's in our lifetime. That's the last 10, 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it's people will be like, you're charismatic? And they're like, this is what charismatic is. And I'm like, nah, I'm not that.
No. You won't see me swinging from the chandeliers or speaking in certain tongues or anything like that. Although I do believe tongues and gifts. I don't believe they stopped. I'm a continuationist to the bone, but boy, you won't see me speak in languages that I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I speak in tongues, but that's to me. That's about it.
The joke was I was talking to someone and its tongues broke out, and I looked around and said, is there an interpreter in the house? No one stepped forward. I'm like, that man is on crack. And I just ignored him. If someone stood up to interpret, I'm like, all right, I'm listening. But until I hear an interpreter, that person's on crack.
That's interesting. I've heard various, breakdowns of that. Some of my more Pentecostal friends have said things like, well, if it's a group of believers only, it's okay to speak in tongues without an interpreter. Which is where they're going with this, right? Because they're saying, well, Paul says the reason why you need an interpreter is because of the unbelievers in your midst. And if there is no unbelievers in your midst.
I'm not sure I'd take that as license to do something.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
But I can see the logic of it. I don't dispute it. I don't know if we want that sort of license because that's pretty dicey.
Yeah, well, it seems like what Paul is essentially saying is that prophetic word becomes that tongue becomes, the interpretation makes it a prophetic word. Well, prophetic could still mean prophetic for believers as well, as opposed to nobody knowing what anybody's saying.
Well, and then if we go back even to, chapters 1 through 4, he's having to do with factionalism and all this sort of tribalism and insanity. So Paul's basically like trying to guide them into being wise with their witness, because they're all having sex with each other in 1 Corinthians 6. And then says, so he's saying about your witness. I take it more as among you or unbelievers among you, not necessarily within the assembly, but within the broader community. You already have a trash image, guys. Don't make it worse. They already think you're cannibals. They already think you're sexually immoral people that are even worse than them, which shocking. Maybe don't make things worse by being crazy on the streets and saying, so I take a little more, I think Paul's a little more critical, but that's only because of the excesses of the movement, not because he's opposed to tongues or anything.
Correct. Yeah, because I mean, he goes after him, right? He goes, look, man, like I talk more in tongues than all you guys.
Yep, I'm the chief tongue talker.
I love when Paul does that, right? Like one of my favorite passages is when he says, I'm so glad I didn't baptize any of you guys.
Except when I baptized so and so.
Except those.
I don't remember.
Except that
I
one
don't remember
family.
who else I baptized. Yeah,
that's about it.
Talk about hedging your theological baptismal bets. I don't remember who else I baptized. It doesn't matter anymore.
Think about how bad you would feel like hearing that, right? Especially in the honor and shame culture of like, hey man, like you guys are such a mess. I'm really happy I didn't disciple much of you're
the
not.
The apostle of God is saying that to you.
You guys are so messed up. I'm very happy that nobody can say it's because of Paul they're like that. Like that's essentially what he's saying. And I one time I remember being a part of a conversation, and I was much younger, and it was these pastors that were having the conversation. I was just kind of a fly on the wall, and they were talking about how many people that they had married, and how many of those marriages had ended up in divorce. And so they were throwing out kind of numbers. They're like, oh, that's interesting. I was sitting there and thinking about it. I was like, oh man, like I don't know if I want that on me. Like,
well, that's why I've done vow renewals. I've done that once. I will not marry friends or people at my church for the sole reason because I want to be part of the wedding. I don't want to be sitting up there worried about it. I want to actually enjoy the festivities. And two, I also have a very, I wouldn't say, I've seen enough marriages go bad that unless I do strong marital counseling and I know these people to the core, no, I will not try and bless or baptize something that I've not vetted. It's, I'm like, no. And it's selfish too. I also, I want to enjoy I want to enjoy the wedding. It's obnoxious to be up there for 3 hours and then finally you get to go eat. And it's the worst feeling in the world. I want to actually be there with my friends. That's why I'm here. Yeah.
So. I've said no to, so the weddings that I've done, I've been pretty close with all the people. Mm-hmm. Some have sort of stopped coming to church and stuff like that, but I still talk to them. Mm-hmm. But I was invited, like, hey, can you do a wedding for my cousin such and such? And I was like, no, I'm so sorry. Like, no, I just don't know them. Like, I can't say they're Christians in good conscience. They're not confessing Christ. Like, all you want is somebody just to do a ceremony and
I know there's courthouse. Go to the courthouse.
Yeah, and that's some pastors don't mind that. Some pastors don't mind doing that. And I know pastors that kind of see it as an evangelistic opportunity and so on and so forth. I just, again, because of the cultural sort of thing that's in there, people ask for that. It's just I can't in good conscience. Like when I wanted, like the last wedding I did, it was really cool because I was able to get up there and say comments like, hey, this guy started pursuing this girl, and we've known this girl for a long time. And when he started coming to our church, we were very skeptical of him and his motives and his Christianity. He's a dear brother. We've gotten to know him over the years. But that was like the fact that you can get up and say something like that and have the connection with the people and have spent time with them and love them and care for them. Like it's just, it's a lot more beautiful than, I have no idea who these people are that are standing in front of me, but we're declaring them husband and wife before the Lord and making all sorts of proclamations. And these guys in the comment section are fighting with each other about the Pope. Okay,
Oh
I'm
my
not going to
God.
bring up the Pope, but AJ Wilson says something that it's very interesting. Maybe we can talk about it, Nick. He
Sure.
said, "The the Bible condones religious images. Look at the Ark of the Covenant and the temple." What do you?
Uh,
So your knowledge of the Second Temple, Judaism, and how scholars would have looked at images, and in the church, I mean, the Great Schism, they're talking about 3D images versus 2D images and the difference between them and all
right.
that stuff.
Um, I'm trying to think of a way to articulate this. One, I think Paul, and I can only really speak to Paul specifically. I don't think Paul would have approved, not because he's some sort of prude or anti-art or whatever. Um, if we look at how he uses for the Ark of the Covenant, right, in Romans 3, the um, I think propitiation or expiation is asking the wrong question. I think it's referring to the mercy seat. Christ is the mercy seat, the hilaster, and the top of the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm.
Uh, and that's actually fair. If I remember correctly, that's a fairly patristic view. Origen and others have kind of taken that. And so what Paul, I think, is arguing is that Christ, and the incarnate and fleshed Son of God, is essentially as he was the telos of the law, so too he is the telos of the sacrificial system. That lines up very nicely with Hebrews and other texts as well. But if Christ is the image of the invisible God, of course, as Colossians utilizes that image too, or that language, then I think Paul would have thought that the question, from my understanding of what Paul would say, of course, I think Paul would look at that question with kind of a bit of a kind of a what? Like we have Christ for this. Christ kind of summarizes, encapsulates, recapitulates, embodies, pick whichever term you want. These the old stories come to their figurehead in him, their primacy in him. So the idea of an image is at best redundant, I think, to him, because you don't need an image anymore. You have Jesus Christ, access through faith, through his blood, that sort of thing.
It was like a living image.
A living image, an image that can be accessed anywhere at any time, because and of course, if Christ is ascended, and I think Paul affirms that, you get this image of Christ when he ascends to the Father, and he's at the right hand of the Father with the name that is rightfully his, that has always been his, making intercession for us. There is no image that can encapsulate that. The only thing we have is the closest image would be the Eucharist, the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I take a more memorialist or Baptist understanding of that. I'm not opposed to other ideas. I think what truth there is in those can be best summarized in the memorialist understanding. So I'm not an once and only this thing. I just think this is the best explanation. But if the body of Christ is represented in his ascension and his crucifixion, all these sorts of things, then there is really no need for any physical image or icon or anything like that, because Christ embodied is that already. And you already have him as your high priest, your intercessor, your savior, your God, your friend, and all these other images. So I think whatever was true in the Old Testament is summarized and finds its full fulfillment in Christ. And therefore we look to Christ to kind of explain how those images work in the Old Testament. And if Paul's right about him being the Paschal Lamb, about Christ being the mercy seat, the embodied Ark of the Covenant, then those sorts of questions, I think Paul would just he wouldn't understand the question, because he's like, well, we have Christ, who is the image of the unseen God, whose body was broken for us, who is the mercy seat of all these things. So for him, all those metaphors and images and histories kind of collide in Christ. And so for him, the question must be asked in a Christological way, versus kind of through the paradigm of the old way. Doesn't mean the old way is wrong. It's that Christ now helps us interpret that and best embodies it. So that's kind of how I would understand Paul and Hebrews and perhaps John as kind of making that point. And so it's not an answer to the question, because I don't think the New Testament authors would ask the question or make the statement in that way. they have a much more refined understanding. It's not to say the question's wrong. It's just it's not a question the New Testament authors would ask.
Yeah, we
because they
gotta
have a
take
different set.
yeah, correct. We would have to take their thoughts and try to build from that as to how we want to do those things, right? To me, it seems to be the case that it's more about like what we're doing with these things.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like I love paintings. I love beautiful paintings. I love beautiful churches, in the sense of like the way they're constructed.
Yeah.
And if they have theological significance in their constructions, I think that's beautiful if it can be explained. It becomes problematic when people take images, kiss bricks, because they think there's some kind of a holiness to it. There's some kind of a, I don't know, special thing to it. And if somebody tells me people don't do that stuff, then you're completely and utterly blind, and you haven't spent
I think a lot.
80 seconds with people.
Do that. I think too many people do that. There are some people that I know that do try to make a very strong distinction between veneration and worship.
Correct.
And I'm willing to, and I know you understand this too, but I'm willing to go along with that. It'd be okay. I'm willing to go there with you, but let's not pretend that there aren't people that don't make that distinction, and it is, I would say, very close to idolatry.
Look, here's what I would say, because I've seen this so much. There's definitely Orthodox, Catholic, in those circles where those things are prominent. There's individuals that preach and teach. There's pastors and priests who preach and teach, like, don't do these things, don't bow before these things, don't kiss them, don't X, Y, and Z. My issue is, if the doctrine of the church is what is being said it is, why aren't all of them doing that? Why don't we have like the entirety of Catholic priests getting up and saying, hey, stop kissing statues, right? Like there's absolutely nothing about that statue. It doesn't matter whether it's 50 years old, 100 years old, 8 days old, or 2,000 years old. It doesn't matter. There's nothing special about it. You're not doing anything to God, right? I'll share this experience. I was actually at an Armenian Catholic church. For those people who might be freaking out over that, there are Armenian Catholics, and they're a part of the Eastern wing of the Catholic Church. They were brought in, I think, in like the 1700s, as opposed to Armenian Apostolic, which they're not Eastern Orthodox or Catholic, right? So I was at an Armenian Catholic church. I was just sitting in the church, and then this guy came in there, and he did his prayers and stuff like that, and then he started like kissing the marble walls, and my heart broke, because to me that showed that he's doing something that has been religiously motivated. It's been taught to him. There's nothing special about those bricks, right? And it's like, I'm like, dude, like, I wish you just knew Jesus. And I could be wrong about that. He could know Jesus and just be wrong doing that. But I've seen that so much, because when I was a kid, I was taught to do that stuff. That's the thing. Like, I was taught, like, you go over to that cross and you bow and you kiss and so on. And the questions were never answered as to like why I should do that. It's like, well, that's what we do, right? And that's what like really bugs me. It's like, let's come out and say this is wrong. Like, I want Catholics to come out and explain it, and there are some who do that. But for every, I'm just going to throw a random number out there. For every one person that does that, there's like 10,000 that actually think there is a power. They think that there's some kind of a special sort of thing in those statues or in that act or something like that. So Catholic Tutor says, ignorant Catholics turn it into idolatry. So here's a question for you, Catholic Tutor. How much, percentage-wise, of the entire world Catholic Church is what you just termed as ignorant Catholic? See, I think as a Protestant, I can value the art, the music, like all of that. I can value it, no questions asked, and think it's beautiful. And I actually think it would be a lot better for Protestant churches to have some of that stuff within the way we did. Like, I light incense, guys, like, not at church. I do it myself at my house because I love it so much. And I'm talking about, like, not like Eastern Buddhist incense. But, not like Buddhist incense, right? Like frankincense, like the real deal, brought to me from the motherland, because I love it. And it for me, that smell hits my nose. It immediately puts me in a church, because probably when I was really, really small, like when they took me out the house, they took me to a church, and I've been smelling that my entire life. And so that does something to me, and I like that. I like walking into church, and it's just full of incense like that. And I think there's all sorts of biblical references to that, obviously. But when we can say stuff like that, like let's just say ignorant Protestants do X thing. And the question is, do we have a vast majority of Protestant pastors who are saying, hey, stop doing that X thing? It's not what we believe. And if we're not, then I would say the same exact stuff to Protestants. Yeah. That's something we should think about.
No, and I agree. I think with a lot of, I read Paul on idolatry and idols, right, in 1 Corinthians 8 through 10. And I think Paul, if you read Paul's letters, and like, this man knows Greco-Roman culture, he knows the magnificence of art. Like, he understands Rome for all of its perversity and immorality and all that sort of stuff was a very beautiful area to live, provided you could afford to live in your area. But like, art was like, we can go look at these paintings, we can go look at the structures and the amphitheaters, like we can see monuments to human creativity, for better or worse. Paul knew that. Paul understood that. The problem I think Paul would have is the idea that you can and somehow contain or encapsulate God in a thing that God made. I think and that's why, that's why I think he inserts Jesus into the Shema, right? In 1 Corinthians 8, Hear, O Israel, but for us there is one Lord. There's many so-called gods, air quotes, and there's all these idols and all this sort of stuff. And he's like, guys, like, there is nothing else. Like, there are things that go bump in the night. There are evil spirits. There are demons. There's Satan. There's horrific things in the world, principalities, powers, things that go bump in the night. But the idea that anything that God made could somehow represent God in a state of worship, except for Jesus Christ, is problematic. And so I think for Paul, he's too much of a Christological theologian to be okay with that.
It's good. Said it's not percentages, because I don't want to ignore them.
Yeah.
It's not percentages. It's what the doctrine teaches. I went to the sources and saw that the church teaches not what individual Catholics do. People always mess up and turn devotion into religion. Hey, I will take that. I think that's completely fine. My only pushback to this would be something like, there's things that are claimed by doctrine in the church that I think are very problematic. The one that I think that I've really enjoyed listening to is, I think it's the Assumption of Mary, if I'm not mistaken, the bodily Assumption of Mary. I think Gavin Ortlund does a really good job of speaking about this and quoting from the church fathers and saying, look, it's not in the church fathers till this period of time, and it just comes into the conversation. And that's problematic. But that's such a highly held view doctrinally among Catholics. There's an issue here that it's very interesting to me. The apostolic succession is a really funny sort of thing to me. Because let's just say, forget Protestants for a second. Just throw them to the side. The three branches, and I'm ignoring another branch there because all sorts of stuff could be argued for that, like in regards to the Church of the East, the Syrian Church of the East. The three branches, the Coptics or Oriental Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox, and the Roman Catholics all claim apostolic succession from different apostles. But then they disagree on stuff. Like, even if Protestants aren't a part of this conversation, right? Like, do we have statues or do we only have 2D images as the East-West schism is?
Careful, don't forget the filioque clause.
Yeah.
not to be a smart aleck, but
yeah, but you're right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I mean, we're talking about the Trinity there. Mm-hmm. Right. If we want to talk about in regards to the Theotokos, are we saying the God bearer, or are we talking about Mother of God? And look, I personally think that's not even an issue to be having an argument with. I think it was a linguistic issue, and I'm actually completely fine saying Theotokos. I in the Chalcedonian Creed, I don't translate it. I just say Theotokos because I think it means God bearer. And I think Mother of God, people misunderstand and confuse and think all sorts of weird stuff about Mary that they shouldn't, because mother means something specific to them. Mm-hmm. Even think about it when we think about God as a father. And the concept in the New Testament when we talk about like the only begotten Son of God, the word begotten. Think about the amount of times that we as Christians have to tell Muslims, it's not what you guys think it is. That's not
God
what begotten means.
Sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's not what it means. The issue is like in regards to apostolic succession, I think people make too much of it. It should also be said that the Protestant Reformation was not saying you guys get apostolic succession and we don't. That's a misunderstanding. The Protestant Reformation, I mean, you're looking at Luther and them, they're actually saying we're recovering apostolic succession in the proper sense. What you guys have done is have messed certain parts of that up, right? And again, I always want to tell people to go listen to Gavin, because Gavin has such a beautiful, humble way of explaining this stuff, and his sources are just like phenomenal, where he'll quote Protestants who, like second generation Protestants who are talking about, who were talking to the Eastern Orthodox patriarch, the Greek patriarch, and talking about how we're brothers in Christ. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so they were a lot more willing to be accepting of the Orthodox, the Catholics, as brothers, as a part of the same family, compared to their counterparts who were like, no, you don't accept this, you don't accept this, no, we're the one true church, you're done. So these are like serious things we should think about. Again, I have no issue in regards to sitting down at the table and talking about this, but we should definitely not ignore it. But let's not also make it seem like something it's not. I grew up in I was born in the mother see of the Armenian Apostolic Church. I was born in the Vatican of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Okay, there's a 1,700-year-old church. The Catholicos sits where I was born and raised. It was highly religious as a town and a city. I saw all of this stuff. And I had questions as a kid, like, why are we kissing that cross? And why are we bowing before that? And the reality was, it was just like misinformation, no information, wrong information. Church doctrine wasn't in there. People weren't sitting, priests weren't teaching church doctrine. They barely knew church doctrine themselves. And this could happen in Protestant churches. I mean, think about the sort of pastors we have. I'd mean, let's just say whatever it is that they're saying. Let's look at the way it was used and what it meant, and then go off of it like that properly, so we're not miscommunicating the ideas we have. We're not talking about like all tradition is bad, right? Come join us in this new way of doing things that has now become a tradition 500 years later. Like, come on.
Right. No, and I think what if we want to turn this ship around, right? I mean, I'll speak mostly to Protestants, but I mean, the way the Roman Catholic Church is going with Pope Francis, who
Hey,
knows? I
we
mean,
might see another schism. I mean, look,
well,
folks, if you weren't paying attention, because I was, um, there was a big schism. The biggest schism in the church happened in the last, what is it, 5 to 7 years? And it was the split within Eastern Orthodoxy between the Ukrainian and the Russian church. Or what we would say the Russian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church over Ukraine. That's huge news. There was a church schism and split that just took place. And do not think that there might not be a split that might take place within Catholicism. Don't forget, there were periods of time in history where there were two popes.
Well, if you look at how Pope Francis is going, like it looks to me, and again, I'm not keeping, I don't subscribe to Vatican Today, so you know, grain of salt. I would be shocked if the upper echelon of the Roman Catholic Church won't be like the PCUSA or the Episcopal Church in 10 to 15 years, given who he's placed in his kind of who will succeed him, kind of the College of Cardinals and all of that. I'm not saying I want that to happen. Obviously, I'm not.
Oh, I don't.
I'm not screaming. You know, hey, you know, this is great for us. Mostly because I still have friends in the PCOSA who are fighting tooth and nail for orthodoxy, so I understand that. But like, I'm looking at going like, guys, like, I don't know how much longer you're going to be able to make these sorts of claims with academic integrity. And I'm not saying people who make those claims are liars, but it becomes one of those things where Protestants have to face the noise on certain things that we've problematized, you know, a hyper individualistic view of salvation and of church when
Correct.
or the issue of individual election to salvation, my sins versus sins, it's not to say, there isn't a both and, but we often go with the both and leave out the and. And what I'm seeing and what I hope to do is and I've already talked to you about this a little bit, so forgive the dead horse beating, but I think we need to have more pastor theologians.
Amen
I think
to that.
we need men and women to basically stand up and do theological education in the church through sermons, through study, through all sorts of things. Because at the end of the day, an educated church that knows what it believes, that, and I'm going to use the term, catechizes their kids, that the children know what they're doing. Like my son, like he'll run. I'm a pastor at a Baptist church, right? We're as low as you can get on the totem pole of that. And I say that with a smile on my face as an ordained Baptist minister, right? But my son runs up to the baptistry and looks down and goes, "That's baptism. That's sinners go here." And I'm like, "That's right. That's yes." And I've had conversations with them about Jesus and with all these sorts of things. And, I'm like, one day I hope you'll be baptized. I hope you'll recognize, and all this. And we have those conversations and we explain and we pray, we watch, we sit down and we pray together, and I try to teach them. It's like, I feel like we've done with public schools, and I'm not knocking public schools just as the easy hit, but it's like when you don't engage and educate your kids, your family, your community, within the community, we're already learning stuff. We're all sponges. We're all absorbing information and contradictory data and then all this sort of stuff. We're learning stuff whether we like it or not. We're being influenced by stuff whether we like it or not. And the only way to do that, aside from, the Holy Spirit and all that sort of stuff, is engaging with the local church as a place of mercy, of refuge, but also theological education, where you come here to know why you're a Christian. And I'm teaching a Bible study. We're going through scripture and ethics, and we spent like three weeks in Genesis 1 and 2, just verse by verse. What did God want the world to be like? Mm-hmm. What did he want? Not just male-female stuff, although that's important. How did he construct the world? What did he desire? Why is it good versus very good? What about the fall? And are these ethical things here? Are those a product of the fall, or this? And people are internalizing it. People are hungry to learn. Our churches are hungry for that. And I think
people are hungry for the word of God. Yes, that's just generally true.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, a church that does not educate, disciple its people won't be a church. And I say that to my Eastern Orthodox friends, my Roman Catholic friends, my Baptist friends. educate your members. Take the time as much as you're able. Believe me, I know how difficult pastoral ministry is. I understand that. Take the time to do that. You don't have to do a lot, but they need to know why they're there. They need to know what Scripture demands of them, and they need to know how to engage the world at a base level so that when things come up that you aren't there to help them with, they at least know what to do. And I'm optimistic for the next generation, honestly. Zoomers, people that are, you and I are mid to late millennials. I look at Zoomers and the next generation. I'm like, I get the sense of revival personally.
Yeah, I didn't have that kind of a sense. I will be transparent here. I didn't have that kind of a sense. I started, as many of you guys know, I've recently taken on a job with Young Life. And I've been hanging out with a lot of 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And I'm a lot more optimistic than I was.
Yeah.
They're a lot smarter. They are a lot more accepting and understanding. Look, I'll tell you this. I spoke to a group of 50 kids today at a lunch club, at a public high school, out of the Gospel of Luke, the passage that has to do with the angels proclaiming the good news to the shepherds. That room was, I spoke for about 5 to 6 minutes, okay? And I challenged them on a couple of points. Didn't overwhelm them, didn't give them a crazy sermon. I just spoke about what the good news was that was proclaimed to these shepherds. And I spoke about how them proclaiming that this person being born is Savior. And that Savior implies you need saving. And that means there's a problem with us. And then so I spoke a little bit about kind of what the gospel is, our separation from God. There's a chasm, there's a bridge that needs to be covered, and Christ did that. You could have heard a pin drop. Mm-hmm. There are a bunch of young people, rowdy. It's their lunch break. They want to eat. And for those 5 to 6, 7 minutes, pin drop, silence, paying attention, listening, processing, thinking. And I was just like, as I was speaking, I was like, man, like, this is so awesome. Because I remember being that age and completely disconnected from Christianity, from Jesus, from the Bible. It was when I was 17, I started thinking about these things, and that led me to Christ eventually. But I would have been not in that classroom when I was in high school. I would have been outside making fun of the people in that classroom for being there. And so, but it's crazy, man, like nowhere to sit. Folks were standing. And so that gives me quite a bit of hope. And I would agree with you, man. Like I would say in the last 3 to 4 months, I highly appreciate this generation of kids. And I think a lot of times we sit there, we're the old guys who are like, get off my porch sort of stuff, right? Yeah. And when you actually spend time and interact with them and talk with them and listen to them, you're going to be challenged.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, it's there's a few young people I talk to, and just to piggyback off what you were saying, there is, I think, this deep, abiding, pervasive, almost oppressive sense of anxiety, depression, immorality. Like I think they know more than we do. Millennial, I think our generation, we were sold a bill of goods, and now we're cynical. We're not hungry, we're cynical. And I'm speaking broadly there, but you talk to your average millennial about church, there is this kind of openness still, but there is a hard-heartedness, I think, to a lot of us. And I see it myself, obviously. But the people I've talked to, I'm like, they know they're sick. They know that the world is broken. They know, you can read the headlines. They see pervasive, wars, rumors of wars, economic exploitation, crashing, death everywhere. Now they're having to deal with abortion and sexual ethics or lack thereof. They had to. You and I I won't speak for you. I had to grow up when the Twin Towers fell in 2001. That was my moment of, oh,
Yeah.
the world is not what it's like. But these kids have it when they're like 5, 6, 7. Like they're having this when, way before you and I hit puberty, And so I'm looking at this going like, they know they're broken. And because they know they're broken and the world is broken, they're hungry for what can be. And I think you're going to see a major sense of revival. I think you're going to see a major sense of reclaiming the gospel. I think you're going to see a resounding pushback against all the ethical insanity going on in our culture. I think you're going to see folks step up and be like, all right, no more. Like you've given us your best, and it's scuba law. It's trash. This is not healthy. This is not healthy.
Here's the thing. I think this is the generation that could potentially break liberalism. And I mean I mean that in all the ways. I mean that in politically, I mean that theologically, because these guys were fed that stuff since they were born, as opposed to us when we were like teenagers. This like certain stuff became a lot more acceptable in culture and stuff like that. And these guys were like raised on it, and they're going to come to a point where they're like, stop selling us this nonsense. It's destroying us. And we're not going to buy it.
When you went to church, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? They're doing the same thing, except instead of a church, it's liberalism, it's progressivism, it's insanity. So they're looking at us going like, what the hell did you teach us? And they're looking at us, no, we want to go back to history. We want to understand what brought us here in the first place. They understand, at least at an intuitive level, that what they're being shoved down their throats is not holy, righteous, or good, or healthy. And they're sick of it. And I think you're going to see, I'm with you. This is going to be, if trends being what they are, this is going to be the most conservative generation since like World War II.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how minorities are gonna revolutionize the church, because, and I see this in myself. Like I'll be around a bunch of white people, that'll tend at times to be a bit liberal. But if another white person came out and said something, number one, they're kind of afraid to say some of the stuff, like their more conservative values and stuff like that. That's one of the things I've realized. But I've also realized that when the minority says that, nobody says anything. They're afraid to a certain extent of being called racist, bigot, X, Y, and Z. So they just don't challenge it. And I was thinking about the church the other day, in regards to the liberalism in the church. It's like, dude, like the minorities need to come out there and be like, stop this nonsense. We're not going to buy it. We don't want your stuff pushed on us.
Great story. All right, so I won't name this person because I doubt he would watch this, but I'm not going to throw shade like that. You don't know this person. It was at my old church, the first church where I served in pastoral ministry. It was a center-left Baptist church. Don't hold that against me. A lot of wonderful people there. There's a reason I left. We'll leave that there. But I was talking to a minister in the United Methodist Church, and this was just when they had their first vote for same-sex marriage. And I'm going to paraphrase what was said, but it was implied that we would have gotten what we wanted, i.e. the white, woke, progressive church in the States, if it wasn't for Africa. If it wasn't for Africa. And I just sat there for a second and went, you mean the people you couldn't colonize and coerce into agreeing with your white values?
Talk about racism.
We'll talk about whiteness, talk about privilege, talk about power, talk about oppression, talk about all the words that get used. I'm like, dude, like you are the embodiment of the thing you claim to hate. Welcome to the New World Order. It sucks for the rest of us too, doesn't it? But it was just this. And you talk to, I mean, I was almost, one of my other positions I almost had was I was going to be the first, I was applying or candidating at an African-American church. And that church was very conservative. And like you talk to people, you discover that the world is complex. People are different. People think differently. And I think this goes back to the Zoomers. People hate being typed. They hate being treated as if, tick off all the boxes, do this, 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 and this. And I think people resent that because it's fundamentally racist. And they fundamentally look at it and go, this is my name. Don't tell me what I have to be. And the fact that you have the African churches the Anglican, the Church of England, the World Anglican Commission or whatever it's called, fighting back against the Church of England now, fighting against the UMC, fighting that. And then you have the UMC, the Global Methodist Church splitting. One of the first global Methodist churches in the area is, I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think the first pastor/church in the area is a black woman ordained in the Methodist Church. Like she's the first. That's the first church. Like so, it's like I think this is going to sound. I'm agreeing with you. The black church with its values will be the major stumbling block to white progressivism in the United States, because it already is the stumbling block to white progressivism in the United States. And the more white churches recognize that, hey, there's a reason they're called Second Baptist Church. It's probably because of us. Maybe we get on the bandwagon of reconciliation, forgiveness, repentance, and actually engage in a way that goes, hey, look, we put you at Second Baptist Church as First Baptist Church. We're sorry. How do we do that? And maybe there's a way for reconciliation and ethnic harmony, like Ephesians 2 talks about, that is bigger than all these questions. But at the end of the day, that's what the church is, a body with many members. And maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, so am I, because there's that echo that's back.
I'll mute myself.
It's funny. It goes away and then comes back. Maybe I notice it more, and maybe I'm a bit more vocal around some folks. Maybe it's because I'm a minority and I say all sorts of crazy stuff, and I realize if a white person said that crazy stuff, they'd be called a racist, but they won't dare call me that because I'm a minority. And I should say, I don't mind taking advantage of that, because it needs to be said. Like if it's in the Bible, and I believe it's in the Bible, and people are talking about, oh, in their culture they did it this way, which is usually, we hear that sort of stuff, and I'm like, well, we still do it that way in my culture. Like nothing's changed. Like I have expectations. I have no problems looking at a couple of teenagers who are cussing around me and telling them, shame on you. You need to stop doing that. There's women around. And like, oh, look at that guy. He's being a chauvinist. No, I'm not. I value women, and I think there's a way you should speak around them. And I think you should stand up and give your seat, and I think you should let them eat before you. And that's just the cultural respect for women that has been passed down to me. And I realize other people don't think like that, don't do that. But then there's this weird desire, maybe infatuation of wanting that from some certain people. And I think, frankly, this is the reason why individuals like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate are popular with the young people, because those are the guys telling young people, hey, there's expectations. Don't listen to these goofballs who are telling you that they don't expect much from you. Here are the expectations. And as much as Andrew Tate says a bunch of nonsense, stupid stuff, there's a couple of things he says that's right. And people get attracted to that, where there's a lot more than that Jordan Peterson says that's very right, except his hermeneutics. But that's for our Monday episodes. Nitty said, what in the business is this? Just two guys, one with a really cool hat and one with a good head of hair who chooses to cover it with his hat, and the other one, a bald guy who chooses not to cover it. So,
yeah, I need a haircut so bad. Oh,
my kids need haircuts. Nitty, welcome. This is an apologetics channel, but right now we're just two friends who are sitting down and talking about theology and all sorts of
basically
really
this
cool
is
stuff.
a substitute for getting a Nashville hot chicken sandwich. It's better just to get online and chat together.
Well, that would require we drive.
Yeah, and gas is expensive these days, and you're not worth it, and I know I'm not worth it.
And I don't have an electric car.
Oh, gee. Oh, so it's even worse for you.
Yeah, I got a hybrid. It is pretty good, actually.
No, I if I could go back in time, I'd get a hybrid as well. But,
yeah, we got a hybrid Highlander, and I'm very, very happy with it. He said, why would you ever go there in the first place, Justin? Justin said, I will never go to Fantastic Sam's or Supercuts again. Why would you do that in the first place? You need to go visit one of our good Armenian barber friends who will charge you $45 for a haircut, but they'll do a phenomenal job. Nice lineup and all of that.
I've just gotten used to doing my own hair. So I'll probably need to do that.
Nitty is joining us. Just give me a second here.
Cool.
Let me switch that up, and then if anybody else wants to call in, you're more than welcome to call in. Hey, man, I like your shirt quite a bit. Let me just say that first and foremost. Wow, I'm
a little laggy. I hope that's not.
You're not.
I don't know if it's my browser or whatever. Or
you don't seem. No, yeah, you seem just fine. Don't worry about how Ecamm is showing things on my end. You're not laggy at all.
All right, great. So yeah, I'm subscribed to you both, and I hang around. It's a time. You can see all my Legos now,
dude. I'm just like, that's phenomenal.
I'm a big nerd.
Look at my Legos.
Look at what I choose to spend my money on.
Yeah, I collect Marvel stuff.
Dude, that is so cool.
I try to share them with my kids. I mean,
but they mess it up, so you don't share them.
I have one standing rule. It's if you break anything, just tell me.
Okay, that's fair.
So they can play with stuff. It's just, they're freaking Legos. I mean, that they're meant to be built, right? And so
yes,
break it. It's moving on. Ooh, that is a big cigar. What kind of cigar is that?
Hey, your camera keeps going on and off, or that's the light in here. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, I think it's an older laptop, so it's one of those. This is the what's it called? It's out of Zeal Cigars in Phoenix. It's a house blend that they do. Kind of tastes like a campfire with a little bit of vanilla, like Ram Cracker. It's not flavored or anything, but if you're into cigars, Zeal Cigar, that's my dude. You'd love him, Arthur. He's basically a Calvinist dude, bro, who lifts weight and eats meat. So you'd probably love him.
Who are we talking about? I missed that part.
My buddy Brad, he's in Phoenix, North Phoenix area, has a cigar shop called. Do I have the? Oh, Zeal Cigars, like Zeal for
Zeal, like Zeal for the Lord.
Zeal for the Lord. Great cigar place. Good people there. If you're in Phoenix, great area. I'll probably make a drive out there for spring training, maybe in a few months. So
that's cool.
He's got a house blend that I've been enjoying for a while. It's perfect.
I wish I had my Gandalf pipe here so I can just show it to you guys. But someone bought me a Gandalf pipe. Somebody bought me a Gandalf pipe, like it's an actual, like the Gandalf pipe.
That's awesome.
It's like 16 inches, and then in Elvish, one of the guys from our church bought that for me, and in Elvish, we wrote on it. It had carved. It's all handmade, and in Elvish it says Mithrandir on it.
Nice.
Because
that's cool.
Yeah.
I used to smoke cigars and I got out of it. My body just doesn't love it. And I guess, are you familiar with like the CAO brand or whatever?
Yep.
I was partial to Cubas, but those can kind of hit you like a truck. And I just have poor self-regulation with like, it's kind of like you hand me a glass of water when I'm really thirsty and it's gone. Like, but that was a cigar, and it's like not a good idea.
Yeah, it's one of those. I have them maybe once or twice a month, but it's one of those.
Your cigars.
I was hanging out with my boy. I turned in the first chapter of the dissertation. The kid's asleep. I don't have to be at church until 2 tomorrow, so it gives me a chance to shower off and get rid of that smell.
Yeah, because you stink after you smoke a cigar. It's just.
But it's the perfect weather.
Do you guys like live close?
We haven't. The funny thing is that we haven't actually met with each other in person. We want to.
I don't know if he's an AI creation. I don't know if he's AI or not. Like, I don't even know if he's real. I know I'm real.
Imagine. Well, yeah. Hey, that's about as far as I can get philosophically. I don't know about y'all. I'm pretty sure I exist. I don't know about the rest of you guys. Yeah, that's about it.
I have external world skepticism. Everybody, watch out.
We live probably without traffic, probably about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Like if it was just a straight shot, about 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's not that far. I recently heard somebody who told their child. This is a philosopher who. This is so bad. I laughed, but I feel bad for the kid. But the kid essentially said, "Hey, how can I believe in God? Because I've never seen God." And the individual said, "Well, you've never seen me either, because I'm a soul and a body."
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god, that's really funny.
I think
Sounds
it's
like JP Moreland.
I think it's
Yeah, I
hilarious.
know.
I think that is so funny. Um, we are in bodies. I should say JP Moreland will be our 50th podcast guest.
Oh really? You're
And we
getting
will
him
be
on your channel?
So he was my first guest, the first ever interview I did. I interviewed and I had like 80 something subscribers, and he was gracious enough to say yes.
That's so
And
cool.
so I saw him recently at the conference, and I said, "Hey, will you be my 50th guest? Because we're close to 5,000, and now we passed it, but." I really wanted to have him or Brandon on, who they co-authored a book on substance dualism, and I wanted him to be the 50th guest. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Brandon's like he got booked really quickly and he's really busy, and then I asked JP and he said, "Yeah, we'll do it." So I think I'm at 47. I'll get 2 more folks as the holiday season progresses, and then he'll be our 50th guest, and we'll be talking about souls and bodies and AI technology and robots and all that stuff.
Nice. Ooh. That sounds interesting.
Oh man, I got a couple of guys lined up. I really want to have conversations about like the advancement of artificial intelligence, and
it's incredible.
Yeah.
I've been using it with Photoshop and generating like really ridiculous things on pictures of my family.
Isn't it crazy? Dude, it's nuts.
Like, I need dolphins and rainbows in this background now.
What I'm really impressed with is how it will do like shadows and stuff. Like the whole generator, the Photoshop generator will actually generate shadows. If you have like a balloon, it'll do the shadow, the reflection in the water, and all that stuff. I just think it's really cool for all my friends who make graphic art stuff. It just makes their work a lot easier and saves them time.
Oh yeah.
I use AI. Let me just give you a secret, YouTube world. Every single one of my shorts that you see is long form. I throw it into a software and it spits out a bunch of shorts. And then I sift through them and I go, I like this one. And it creates the captions. It does the whole template and all that stuff.
Juicy. I like it.
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
it saves me a lot of time from sitting there and editing. I just make a couple of changes and then I upload it.
Genius,
dude! I love the way this stuff is going. Shorts is the way to grow, man. Like yeah. Except our Armenia channel, which is like really weird.
Wait, your what channel?
So we have an Apologia Center channel that's only in Armenian.
Oh,
linguistically. And the guy that does it is in Armenia. He's a guy I'm mentoring and stuff like that. Phenomenal, brilliant young man. He'll put out videos, man. That channel doesn't even have 700 subscribers. And he'll put out a video and it'll get 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. Yeah, and they're not...
Interesting.
He put out a 2-part documentary on Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's like 30 some odd minutes each. And I think one of them got 16,000 views. And considering that, like, linguistically, this is a small community, but I think it's partly because nobody else is doing that. Nobody else is creating apologetics content in Armenian. And so it's like people are really looking for it. Yeah, people love it. People are looking for it. He'll put out a video and I'll look at it because it's night and morning. Like right now it's morning over there. And I'll look at it and it's like got like 15 views. And then like I'll go to sleep and wake up and it's at like...
all this
1,300. I'm like, dude, how come this doesn't happen to me?
Maybe you should start speaking Armenian like halfway through your stream.
Yeah. Then nobody will understand me.
And then just add like Armenian intervieus, right? And everyone's so confused. I'm presuming that you speak Armenian.
I do speak Armenian. Yeah, I read and write Armenian too.
I speak Armenian too. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes. Yeah, okay, it was a terrible joke. I'm sorry. Just for the chat.
One. But it's Armenian.
Hey, you have the gift of tongues, and he knew exactly what you were saying.
So. Yes, yeah.
I can speak in tongues. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that we want to do actually, that they want to do in Armenia, is the interviews that I've done. They want to take them and translate them into Armenian, and so that's cool. Those might be good. But because we interview really cool folks. And
it sounds like
Nick, you interviewed a really cool guy yesterday as well.
Okay, that really confused me because my real name is Nick too. So I'm like, what?
Sorry, Nick.
No, it's fine. No, no, no. I really don't care.
I'll be Scottish Nick, and you can be I don't know. Forgive me. I don't know. I'll just be Scotch Nick. So we'll go with that.
Nah, just keep calling me Nitty. It's fine.
Nitty. Okay.
Is that like, sorry, I'm very curious to nicknames. I love them because is that something like you called yourself when you were a kid, or your parents, or your brother or sister, or something like that, or is that something like how does that?
So, yeah, I'll give you the history of my little YouTube name here. So, back in 2000? Well, actually, before that, when I started getting online as a teenager, I found a way to combine my first and last name into like a short moniker. And so I started using that in World of Warcraft as Nidamos. And I was a little gnome mage. And so people were like, Nidamos, where are you? And so, I'd go on raids and stuff. And then there's this Irish guy. He's like, oh, my little Nidamos, I just love you so much. And I don't know what that was. It wasn't Irish, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
We get it.
Right. And so I stuck with it for a long time. I've kept that name in my back pocket. I started monkeying around on YouTube. I monkey around on YouTube. Some people might think I'm a troll. I don't know. I don't really care. It depends on what day of the week it is.
We are all trolls.
Yeah, it's true. And then I shortened it to Nitty. But it's still a combination of my first and last name to an extent, and I'm totally open with what my name is. I don't care if people know my real name. I just because my part of my YouTube shtick is I just get mad at my former church because it was really culty, and so if you ever go over there, that's just a tip of the iceberg, we'll say. Yeah, so I'm Nick Demons, if anyone's curious, and that is really my name.
Wow, that's a very interesting last name.
Yeah, it's like
someone's gonna pick up on that and like just.
Oh, I don't care. Yeah, I mean my no, I can't say that.
That's why he speaks against his former church. Have you seen his last name?
Some people might think that.
Sure.
So wait, if you wrote a systematic theology, would it be called Doctrine of Demons?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, you heard it here first, folks.
Some people are not meant to write systematic theology books.
It would be unsafe to do so.
It's the next Andrew Murray of work, don't you know? It's just going to be so awesome and revolutionary. And
that's a guy to read right there.
But yeah, it's like part Greek from the word diamos. Some kind of like God messenger or whatever. It could be mischievous. It could be great. You don't know. And then my first name is like Victory of the People or something like that. I believe that's Greek as well.
Victor, Victory or something like that. Yeah. Greek Nikkei is just conqueror or triumphant. So.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the etymology of my
just because we're giving book recommendations, which we weren't. But you mentioned the guy, Andrew Murray. Absolute Surrender is a book that I would recommend any person read devotionally.
I've read parts of it.
That's great.
So what theological... Sorry, go on.
Go.
I was just curious what theological thing you were talking about before I got in, because I missed the preamble to it.
We were kind of trashing the liberal progressives because we think that minorities are going to save the church. Because they
what? You had to be here. I'm sorry. I'm having vocab on tomorrow. That's what I was going to say. I feel like I missed something. Vocab Malone will be on. Well, it was on pre-recorded. That'll drop on my channel at 5:00 Pacific Standard Time, which is probably in time for his live stream at 6 because he goes live basically anytime I'm on. So. Talking about cults and methodology and the history of Black Hebrew Israelites, and we answer your question, Arthur. I screenshotted it and had him answer it, and I'm sitting there listening, going like, "Oh, the world is a creepy place." Okay, so
it's so cool, spending time with vocab, and then we've actually gone and talked to Hebrew Israelites together, and they see him and they just stop talking. That's the problem. Like you can't go and confront Hebrew Israelites because once vocab is there, they've been told not to speak to him They'll talk to anybody around
Oh,
him, but they will not talk to him. And it's really messed up because whatever he says just gets ignored. And
I have a confession to make. I've
confess
destroyed
away.
my YouTube algorithm, and I subscribe myself to several Black Hebrew
Oh,
Israelite channels, just for like the sheer like, what do these people talk about, right? How deep does the rabbit hole go?
very deep.
There is no
I
rabbit
find
hole.
it fascinating to subscribe myself to a variety of different spiritual
Yeah.
stuff, just because there is such a multitude of true believers out there.
Hmm.
And it's amazing to step into their worlds and, be like, how did you get here?
Yeah. The,
How
the
did you
thing
get
for me is like
introduced
I
to this?
love world religions. Right.
Yeah,
Like I've continuously told people if there was anything I would get a PhD in, it would be world religions / like philosophical religious studies or something like that. But then there's groups that are like largely based on conspiracy theories, which I don't consider to be a part of the world religion kind of
I
dialogue
wouldn't
because you
either.
can't dialogue with them. Anytime you disagree and it goes against their conspiracy, everything falls apart, right? So
Yeah.
you need to buy into a number of the conspiracies in order for you even to have a conversation, to get anywhere with them. And that's just like, it's really weird and strange. And that's why he was saying, I think that's why Nick was saying that the world is a creepy place because of some of those, the way they answer some of these questions. And to me, it's very interesting and funny because I know, I'm very, very, very sure that at least, well, I'll tell you this, 100% of Hebrew Israelites I've met have no idea what an Armenian is or where they live. And I love that because I bring it up and they have no idea what to do with me and where I fit on their, tribes charts and
Narrative
all
of the
sorts of
world,
stuff
yeah.
and who was oppressing who at one point. And they're not very knowledgeable. The reality is, like, historically, they're not very, very knowledgeable
Nope.
when it comes to anything beyond the United States or Western European kind of transatlantic slave stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a hard time.
Don't they cherry pick like one Deuteronomy verse about the boats or whatever? Like, and you will be led away on boats. And it's like in 20 or something around there.
Yes.
I'm trying to refresh myself. I had people, some Black Hebrew Israelites, come to one of my former church's church groups, and we were trying to evangelize to them and get them to like understand our take about this stuff, and whew, it was a ride. And then of course they left, and everyone was confused.
The thing is that it's been around. I mean, it's been around for about 100 years, but. Because of YouTube, it became really popular, and people got caught up in it and bought into it. And the very interesting dynamic, I think, if you want to look at it from a sociological perspective, is that you're getting a bunch of people that are actually coming out of it now. That were like born and raised in it. They're the children, like their parents became Hebrew Israelites, and that's all they knew. So they were, and they converted. Excuse me. And it's seeing those people or people who converted into it, who've left it because they studied the Bible and they were like, wait, hang on, this is nutty stuff.
This is crazy.
And this is some of the stuff that I've valued in regards to Vocab's ministry that he does, the people he speaks to, and the individuals that even disagree with him. Some of them, at least, will pay attention to him. But it's very interesting that every time I've had Vocab on, I get these comments like. And it's insane because it'll be like one person that'll leave me like 20 comments on their video, like having a conversation. Like, every 5 minutes, he says something and there's a response that comes. I'm like, I'm not going to address this. Man.
Thank you for the algorithm. Thank you for the algorithm. Appreciate you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, wow, that's crazy.
But it's also not like shocking to me because I know that there's been religious groups, ethno-religious groups that have popped out kind of everywhere. Even within Christianity, you've gotten these ethno-religious movements, like the nationalistic kind, where like God specially favors us or something like that. And it's, I mean, it's not that, because those guys would still be qualified as Christians.
Maybe like the Amish. Would that fit that kind of perspective or definition you're going for? It's like its own culture, subculture. Now you could say
maybe,
that
yeah. I'm not very, but like I've talked to some former Amish folks who've actually repented and become Christians, and they'll kind of classify the Amish as like cultic in their theology and practice. Maybe, I'm not sure about their theology, but definitely in their practice. It could be. But it goes really, really deep. The last time I had Vocab on, I had no idea about the stuff he was talking about when it comes to their end times theology and UFOs and stuff.
Wait, UFOs?
Bro, Nick, did you talk to him about this?
Not about UFOs, but we talked mostly about methodology, and I was sitting there going like...
Yeah, so go find my interview with Vocab, the one I did with him. It's on my channel.
Okay.
And he sent me a bunch of videos where we showed the videos, and he commentated on it. And yeah, like this whole stuff about UFOs happening, and they have like posters out there with UFOs and them getting snatched up, and it's really, really interesting stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, so that's what the rapture is.
All right, sign me up. Yeah, I mean, you didn't know that?
Now I do.
It's the only way it could be. It's got to be like an 80s video game, right? With a... All right.
Oh, man.
I have another confession to make.
Hey man, he's a pastor. I'm an elder. Confess away, bro.
I try to be.
Yeah.
I'm a former Christian. So there you go. But I will say this. I still like talking about the Bible. I do on my channel. It is caricatured sometimes. But there are lots of things.
As long as you tell people it's caricatured, I'm good to go.
Oh yeah, I play a character kind of myself. So if people take me seriously, that's their problem. No, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you're clearly joking around and people take you seriously, that's problematic.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm like an anti-theist or whatever, because I'm on here just hanging out with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think I've seen some of your content before, Nick. I see Arthur, didn't you go on Pine Creek not too long ago?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug's fun to talk to.
Yeah, he can be.
Okay, so my experience, Doug's been very
I get
fun
it.
to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Depends what you want to talk to him about, right? Politics, it can kind of don't want.
Yeah, he might be more conservative than I am. I'm not sure.
Yeah, hi JR.
In regards to the Republican stuff, Jerome's in that.
Yeah.
Jerome, we got an empty screen for you if you want to call in. There it is.
I will have to jump in a minute because I got to smoke this and I've got a sermon to prepare for soon. Okay. So he can take my spot.
What's it on?
What is it on? Luke 1. Sorry, I planned out 4 different sermons over the next. Actually,
are you doing an Advent series?
Yeah, I'm doing an Advent series. Okay. So we're doing
that would be the visit of Mary, right, or Elizabeth?
Yeah, the
Magnificent.
Yeah, the visitation of Mary. Yeah, not the Magnificat is next week. But yeah, I was doing a series on baptism and apocalyptic, and then we'll see what happens if they keep me around after the interim. But I'll be doing hopefully going through Hebrews, a little more verse by verse or word by word in some spots.
Our pastor's been going through Mark, and I'm preaching on the 17th, and I'm going to be talking about, I think it's Mark 5, 1-20. It's the demoniac that gets.
Oh yeah.
It's like, give me that passage.
By the lake of the Gerasenes.
I think that's the one. Yeah. So that should be very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, that stuff's interesting. So I love that stuff because the cultural assumptions and what we call power struggles between like Jesus and demons and that like it's fascinating.
Don't talk about me so mean.
Oh man. So I think I'm pretty sure in Greek your name is not pronounced the way you think it is.
I know it doesn't matter.
But okay, so Nick, the other Nick, not
Yes.
well, you guys don't know which one I'm talking about. In the white shirt. How long were you in the church and a Christian?
Like 13 years as an adult. Ballpark.
You look very young, bro. Like you're saying as an adult, you're probably gonna be like, I'm 55 years old, and I'm like, I feel ashamed.
Jesus, no, not yet. My birthday's coming up, but
Okay, well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'm gonna have a child who's gonna have a birthday coming up very soon.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, January 9 is the due date. So.
Ooh, my daughter's birthday is January 2nd.
Cool. Very nice.
Yeah.
New Year.
Man, yeah, that's like pretty close, bro. That's pretty close to the New Year. I told my wife, who knows, man? Maybe like New Year's night, we're on our way to the, New Year's Eve, we're on our way to the hospital. It's very likely.
That's kind of how it went down.
Like St. Patrick's Day, so that was fun. But it didn't happen. We got Pi Day instead of St. Patrick's Day, which, not terrible.
You'll take it.
Yeah. But
yeah, I was a non-denominational Christian, total heretic.
Hey, I'm a non-denominational.
Okay. I know some channels and Christians.
They're all Baptists.
Right, or I don't know.
Light.
Anyway, yeah. So the general theology of the church was you making an informed decision about accepting, Jesus to be the sacrifice for your sins. Once you do that, you're indwelt by the Holy Spirit. You may or may not, get a good sense of your spiritual gifts at some point. You're called to evangelize, be a part of the body of Christ, make disciples of all nations, all that stuff. But unfortunately, my church was pretty culty. But that's not the reason I left Christianity, just to be clear.
So yeah, so when you say culty, what do you mean? I'm curious with that comment.
Yeah,
you don't have to name the church or anything like that. Just like
no, I shit on them all the time. Oh, sorry, I swear.
That's okay.
I don't know. Okay, I poo on them. I wasn't a charismatic. Get out of here. I poo on them. They're Xenos Christian Fellowship / Dwell Community Church in Columbus, Ohio. So hold on.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, hang on, bro. Because I have. I've actually done research on Xenos. They changed their name recently.
Yeah.
And I thought Xenos, from the outside, they had a lot of stuff about them that I quite liked.
Oh yeah.
So like I like the fact that they were elder run and pretty decentralized.
Yeah. I would always tell people that people would be like, "Oh, your church is really big," and I'm like, "No, it's not." Because we're all a bunch of little churches that Voltron into the big church. So
I like that.
Yeah. But no, so all right. That's the problem with them. That's one of the problems is that the website, the teaching content, the even the conference that they threw every summer. We had JP Moreland come,
I know.
William Lane Craig,
John Lennox.
Yeah, John Lennox, Tim Keller, and I kind of Christian swooned over that. But that the problem is that they've curated a very public perception, right? Of, we're in step with the majority of evangelical, Protestant Christianity, not too charismatic. We don't have music, but hey, everything else is pretty much the same, right? You could go to the belief and doctrine section and be like, hot dang, I agree with all that, right? The problem is that the what's the word? The social engineering that they do behind closed doors, that's one problem. Another problem is the hypervigilance of people's personal lives. Now, I know that the body of Christ should be a confidential place and you shouldn't be afraid of anything going on. But they're really good at stripping people of adult autonomy. And what I mean by that is if you're considering a job in another city to meet your family's needs, all of a sudden God can't work there for you. All of a sudden, you need to reconsider your whole life because you just can't, you should not leave where God has planted you. right?
That's weird.
And so that, oh, I'm just getting started, baby. Um, for the youth that attend the church, the same dilemma is presented for collegiate decisions,
So
right?
they all go to Columbus.
Did they
They
have
go to school
to,
there.
or they're rejected, or they're given this perception that they are a lesser Christian, right?
Mm.
And they're going to carry that baggage for like ever, or they're very, sold out parents to the mission of Dwell Community Church. They're going to be like, my child has failed.
Do you
I
know
can't
why they
wait for the day
changed the
they come
name?
back. Publicity. That's
Well, hey guys, I got it.
110%.
I got, not to interrupt you, Nick. I want to hear more. I'm going to catch this on when this is all done,
I'll
because I
catch
want
you
to
on
hear
the
what you're
playback.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll play you back, Nick. Don't worry about it. But I got to
All right,
bounce.
cool.
I got to smoke this, and I got to wait. I should have hopped off an hour ago. But Arthur,
You're good.
Hey, thanks for making this night very enjoyable.
Appreciate you. And Nick,
I'm going to try to keep it that way.
Yeah, let's hope so. If you don't, I'm going to
Sure,
call
See
you
you
out.
later, Nick.
Like, this guy's so boring.
oh, and
I
Arthur,
ran
this
out of
one's
tea.
there we go. All
Nice.
right, y'all take care.
Yeah, don't.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
I hate it. All right, y'all take care.
Okay, hang on.
So,
Let's
all
take
right,
care of that. Okay, yeah, tell me about this.
So, so the name change is entirely publicity driven, okay? Because there's multiple websites. xenosazacult.com, Dwell.
So yeah, I came across that. So let me just cut you off. So I did research on them years ago because I was considering the kind of structure our church should have. And again, I like elder-run churches, and I came across them, and then did the research, took care of all that stuff, and then came back to it recently, and then I kept seeing stuff like that, like, oh, it's a cult and stuff like that. And I was like, I wonder if they've like come out and changed like very essential doctrinal points. And so I just didn't, follow that. But yeah,
So go on.
No, that's fine. Go for it.
So yeah, the doctrine's all the same. The ideas of, and here I pulled up this book, right, during my live stream tonight, because I was talking about some stuff that that was relevant to them. And one of the things that I think, this is my opinion, you take or leave it, right, is that one of the ways in which the control and investment is established or reinforced through this church is by publishing their own literature, their own Christian literature. Yes. And so, this looks shiny, sexy, if you will, and it gives you a sense that these people know what they're talking about, right? They've gone through the effort, and they found a publisher, and their work must have some credibility or authority to it, right? And all the other people in the church are reading it, and it was written by, our senior elder. I'm going to invest in that. And wow, this is all in line with the stuff I'm being taught. And so, it keeps that narrative going that this is one of the greatest Christian places to be. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think. Now, I don't know if that's a conscious effort. I don't think it is. I think it's just a byproduct of them kind of doing the things the way they do them. It's like a happy accident.
Is it like kind of a culture or something like that?
I think that's like the ethos they created. Yeah.
Do you think that ethos was like like people sat there and intentionally did that, or like, hey, here's what we want to create, or it just sort of happened based on personalities of individuals that were in there?
In my most charitable view, I would say it's that, right? It's kind of like, you start a team at a company, right? And, you and the original team founder, you have an idea of like what this team's going to accomplish, everyone's skills, and you set forth goals, right, for your team. And then you're like, okay, here you guys go. I need to step out for like a year, and I'll come back in and check on you and see if you guys are still doing the things that we were doing now. And you come back, and they're like the meanest, disorganized team ever. And you're wondering, like, how did it get here, right? We started with these great intentions, but all it took was a few, highly influential or manipulative people, and they went unchecked for a long period of time, or the way, or it's more subtle, right? A few, questionable things became more normalized, and like the further they get down the road of normalizing those kinds of like authoritarian behaviors, or like invasions of like, life decisions that don't necessarily need to be controlled, like God's greater than that, right? Once that's kind of been like built in, it's very hard to break that away. Like you basically have to de-doctrinate like those behaviors out of the community when they've been just practiced and repeated for decades now.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting because, I mean, this is, again, I looked at them. I actually like the way they have well, at the time when I was doing the research, they had like a 3-tier system to membership, and you have to take classes. Like, I was like, dude, this is like seminary level stuff these guys are offering at their church. This is really cool.
I took them all.
Yeah. And again, I think that's actually a good thing to have in a church to educate your people. And say, hey, whatever, like, here's a leadership class, or here's a hermeneutics class. We want people to be informed on this. I always thought that the reason for that was because the church was originally founded by a bunch of seminarians. They were just a bunch of nerds who were like, hey, yeah, we get the advantage of being in seminary and studying this stuff, and we'd like to see, folks in our church know this.
The further backstory on them is that they were former drug addicts, and their lives got turned around, and they got the opportunity to like, go to school and stuff. But correct. I don't think it was at the outset. I don't think it was the intellectual aspect per se. Like I think that they discovered that over time, that's one of the values that they had, because I believe they saw the culture of Christianity and were kind of frustrated with how ignorant a lot of Christians were that they interacted with. And so they would prefer an equipped, body to, do God's work.
Yeah.
And so with what you're saying about like the things that you like about the structure, the ideals, the equipping ministry, I think those can be all very good things for a church, even though I don't believe any of it right now. I still think those can all be very good things, because I think the more informed people are about their beliefs and where they come from and what they're like and how they compare to even like other denominations, that was one of the classes we took, it's helpful to them, right? And it brings you a greater appreciation of like what you're doing there and why, to a lot of extent, right? Like what part of theology is, our home group based in, right? Mm-hmm. I never knew. So like, let's explore that. Or the way we do eldership. That's probably a more deep one, right? It's like, oh, we kind of base this off of this, Timothy and some stuff in the book of Acts. And then, when we put those things together with some other biblical principles, here's how we do this. Here's how you become an elder and all that jazz, right? And when you establish that stuff, people will feel like they're more an integral part, that they know like kind of the direction they can head in to be a valuable member of the church. All that's well and good. I think, it just needs to be very well tempered with accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that is very important in church culture is whether the leadership could be called out.
Yeah.
So I use that as a sort of like a standard, right? Measuring stick. Is how comfortable are you as any congregant to approach the leadership and say, hey, I have the following concerns. It doesn't have to be all the eldership, because you might have a better relationship with one compared to the other. And if that's like accepted and you're taken seriously, and people go, hey, you know what? I haven't noticed that or haven't thought about that. That's an interesting point. Let me bring it up with the other folks and let's talk about it and stuff like that. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Things are going well. If you kind of approach and it's immediately like, no, you shouldn't, like there's a golden calf right in here, then
That's
There's some
bad.
problems there.
Well, so I guess I should say this is that if you are ever considering that for like your church or whatever, as like a, you want to become like the, the power zords that become the megazord, right? The small stuff
Oh,
that makes the big
the
part. Yeah, you
okay.
Voltron your church together. You're like, yeah, you get the idea. If you want to do that, um, be pretty vigilant of how your decentralized bodies work. And what I mean by that is one of the problems with Dwell's model is that a lot of problematic behaviors will inherently lack accountability because it can take a while from that uncentralized behavior within that group to become known to the people who could do something about it,
Mm.
right? The spiritual authorities or whatever. And I'm not saying you have to nanny like every group or whatever, but like you just really need an active set of like group, like a someone who oversees a couple of groups or something like that. Don't let them be like passive, like, oh, they can come to me when there's a problem. Right?
Like
Don't do that. Like
evaluations, like yearly evaluations of your group.
I'd say every like 6 months or
Hmm.
something, right? And
That's
it's not
pretty
like
reasonable.
a checklist or something. It's just like, how you guys feeling? How do you think like the relationships are between the people in your group? Like, do you think people feel comfortable like coming to you with problems? Do you, and then maybe they just do like kind of like a food inspection, right? They just, when the food inspector comes in, they're just like, hey, I'm here now and I'm looking at
Randomly
your
show up.
fridges, right?
Hey,
Well,
look,
yeah, or
teachers. That
no, not
happens
so
to
much that,
teachers.
right? Not so much that, but more so like, you have a scheduled thing with like the person who's like leading or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
the spouses that lead the small group. But then, you just let them know like, hey, then maybe the next time or two, I want to come to a meeting and just talk to some people. It doesn't have to be very invasive or anything. It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah. So yeah, Barrick, actual oversight, because Dwell's problem in part is that they have these kind of um, ethos, like behavior, like ingrained behaviors and attitudes that are part of their ethos that got spread out from the top down, and the problems with them aren't going back up to the top until it's far too late. If
It's
that
it,
makes
it
sense.
sounds to me that it's maybe a bit too decentralized.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the real problem. That's
And,
interesting.
well, but then once those concerns do get to the top, there's like a long delay. There's an unwillingness to be like, take some accountability, or apologize. Like a lot of the time, they don't even say they're sorry, right? Like
Mm.
it's just, and that's why my channel went so hard on them at the start, because I'm just like, you guys, you just don't care.
So how long since you deconverted?
Oh,
I am
it's been
assuming
like,
that these things aren't necessarily connected, by the way, like the church and your
no.
deconversion.
Well, yeah. So like, I was going through like my own doubts and reevaluation apart from my beliefs about what my former church was like and was doing to me and people like me.
Mm.
And I came to a different conclusion because I was an apologist for my church, really. Like, because when you try to, bring people out to your home group and they ask, okay, what church are you a part of? And then you have to spill the beans, like, this is part of like Xenos. And they go, oh man,
Okay,
uh-uh,
because they would have
no.
been well known in that
Mm-hmm.
community.
Yeah. And so the reputation was bad enough that,
Interesting.
you had to say things like, well, that wasn't my experience. Well, you'll maybe, if you come out to our group, you'll see how we're really different. And that those things that people say aren't really true. Um, so yeah, that's how that kind of went. So yeah, my perception of the church as an organization changed after my beliefs changed. So I didn't necessarily believe they were that culty until I started to re-index and reevaluate my experiences there, and especially my experience, we'll call it leaving, or I would call it coerced out, but not like told like get out of here, if that
Or
makes
like
sense.
the church, not the faith.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
But part of that was a byproduct of me, having the kind of doubts that I had, so yeah, that they happened at the same time, but in fact, my leaving, I was actually like, hey, look, I don't believe like you right now, but what I really want is to be here with my family, because they want to come here every week.
When you
I'm
say your
still your
family, you mean your wife, kids?
Yeah, my wife
Your
and kids.
yeah, not like parents.
Yeah. No. It's like I want to have communal experiences with my family, right?
Yeah.
Because I still, value them, and I still want some friendship and community with you guys. I'm not saying like just because I don't believe, F you, I'm out of here. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I still want to be a good person. I still want to be someone that is dependable and like loves you guys. And that wasn't good enough.
Your wife is your wife still a Christian?
Yeah, we're still married and we're happy. Like,
Yeah.
you'll
Sorry
just
for
have
that,
to
man.
believe me on that one. But no, it's
Yeah,
okay.
it sucks because
well, here, I'll tell you what he said to me exactly. That made me really reconsider like what is going on here. So I gave him like, he's like, why? He literally asked me, he's like, why are you still coming here? And I'm like, and I gave him the answer I gave you. Like, these are the things I want. And, you guys are basically my only friends because the church kind of kept it that way. I didn't say that then, but I was like,
yeah.
you guys are my friends. Like, I'm not going to be here and cause a ruckus. Like, just because I don't believe like you, I'm not going to go in like the middle of the home church and be like, that's bullshit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, not at all. And he's like, well, like, I'm not sure there's a place for you here if that's how you feel, if this is what you're thinking, right? Like why waste your time, basically, like telling me, and to me that said like, we don't really want you here if you don't believe like us anymore.
Yeah, it
right?
seems to me that like it's like there was a fear of having you around, like you would like infect the other people or like cause doubt in other people or whatever like that.
Yeah. And I wasn't even asking to keep going to like the private men's group or whatever. I just wanted to be around my wife and kids, really.
Yeah.
And then like, what was the other thing? Oh, I'd been good friends with this guy for like 8 years.
Oh no.
Right? And we were drinking buddies. We'd sit by the fire. We'd help each other move with our stuff and our kids. We'd fix each other's, cars, house, whatever. And then all of a sudden it was like, I call it like spiritual Alzheimer's. Like, it's like all that all of a sudden didn't exist. And like, we did like a little email exchange, right? And I shared some stuff with him that I was like thinking about, that I was struggling with. And it literally came back with like a litany of apologetics, where it's like, dude, I've been a part of this for like 13 years. You don't think that I've like read this stuff? We sat through it together. I've taught it to you and with you. Like, I just felt so disrespected and like a child, basically, for the interaction to go that way. Right? Does that make sense? Am I
No, it does. It
crazy?
absolutely does. Yeah.
That would be like if you started doubting and you killed your channel, but someone like messaged you as like, hey, I mean, haven't you considered the cosmological argument, man? Like,
Yeah.
haven't you read like Hebrews and like what could happen to you if you leave? Like, it's like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Sometimes folks, and this just goes in regards
Oh
to
yeah, you
everybody.
gotta speak to your channel. Yeah, yeah.
But no, I mean, like, I'm talking to you. I'm talking about like believers, unbelievers. Doesn't matter that like something could be staring us in the face, and we don't pay attention to it. We are so blind to it, and then we'll like talk about this other thing, and it's like, bro, that's not what someone's in front of you, and they're like, I'm in pain, I'm hurting, and this and that, and you're
Right.
like, it's like one of the things. I mean, you've heard this probably before. Is like you can have an argument for the problem of evil.
Right.
It could be a very good argument, right? Very logically consistent, X, Y, and Z. It's probably not the thing you want to bring up when somebody like lost a child. Like you'd be really, really stupid to do that. If they're like, man, I'm in pain. Why would God allow this? They might even say some other things that you would really be disturbed by towards God, and you're like, have you considered this 5-step? It's like, bro, like shut your mouth.
There's morally sufficient reasons, okay?
Yeah,
so put this behind you.
Yeah. It's like that's just not the timing for it. You got to have some wisdom there.
Totally.
And in regards to when you want to address those things and if you want to address those things properly. But that sucks.
Yeah, and to me it was like, this is complete defensive measures. Right?
Yeah, that's my reading of it. And I don't know anything. I just think it's like, hey, we don't want this guy to be spreading his doubt. It could be if I want to give I don't even know if I would give a benefit of the doubt. I just not like publicly, but like in the midst of relationships and conversations, people are going to figure out that this dude doesn't believe this stuff. And there's some kind of a conversation that's going to be had. It's like, hey, so-and-so's here. He doesn't really believe this, or he's walked away from it. The thing I'm thinking is like, if you were influential and you had led and stuff like that, and they were like, well, this guy, we don't, huh?
Yeah, I used to teach small groups, men's groups, disciple, all that stuff.
So that might be why that the defensive stuff is coming up, where it's like, this guy's going to lead people away, or his fall is like too big and folks are gonna kind of freak out, but they're gonna freak out no matter what. Like you stop going to the church. Like what? It doesn't matter.
You basically told me don't come anymore. What do you want?
Yeah,
wait till they find out about that, huh?
That's gonna be a lot worse, right?
Well, I told people about that, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" And I'm like, What do you want to do about it?" And they did nothing. So big surprise.
That's interesting. So does your wife your wife go to a different church now?
No, she goes to the same one.
She still goes there.
Mm-hmm.
That is
well. The real reason though is because she has nothing else. Like friend wise.
Okay, I see.
She told me, she's like, there are times where I would consider a different church, but I'd have to start over.
Yeah, that's tough.
And she's like, I don't know what else to do. Like I love these girls, women I'm friends with so much, and I've been friends with them for a decade now.
Yeah.
And it's literally like, I had a passing conversation with her not too long ago. She's like, yeah, I'm really starting to think I could go to a different church. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, that might be best. I mean, that's just.
Yeah, but I just have to like, I just kind of grin and bear it. I'm like, you are not them. Because she just demonstrates to me that she believes a lot of she believes almost everything they believe. But the way that we interact, the way that her beliefs intersect with our relationship is not how people there would want them to.
Okay.
Because I've heard stories of, not too long in the past, people being encouraged to divorce their non-believing spouse.
No.
Or the person who left the faith or whatever. Yeah.
That is not biblical.
So, I know, it's a real threat though. Like to me, like that was a threat in the back of my head. It's like, and that's part of the reason. Well, not part of the reason. It was in my head, right? When I was like, can I please just keep coming?
Yeah. I mean, that's a point where you open up the Bible and it's like, no, not unless your husband actually or your wife actually abandons you.
Right.
I mean, Paul specifically addresses this point. That's my problem, man.
I know.
If I had hair, I'd rip it out. I got to be like the
Start
old school
plucking
guys,
that
just rip out
beard.
my beard.
We went there same time.
No, it's just so frustrating. It's like
I know.
It's not even like a point where you can sit there and say, well, theologically, you can see a point for it and stuff. Like it is happening in the first century, and Paul is telling people, do not do this unless your spouse abandons you and says, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm done.
Yeah. That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
man.
What are your other questions?
No, I'm just, it's curious to me. It's like, sometimes I look at things and I'm always reevaluating the way we do things at our church. And even we were talking about like cultures that get developed. I was having a conversation with our pastor, who's an outsider to our church, I should say. He's now an insider, but he's been a friend of mine for a very long time. But he's been at our church for about a year. And most of us at our church, like grew up from like youth group together. So we've known each other for like 20 years. And like he'll say things where it's like, hey, I noticed like there's a culture of such and such in this church. And then I'm like, I don't think there is. But you sit there and you talk and then we reason together and stuff. And I'm like, hey man, you might have a point to that, And then we have those like, how can we change it? What can we do? Where do we go about it? It's just like I'm always paying attention. Like for example, like being a bit heady, being like intellectually sort of thing. Like there's a culture of that at our church.
That's great.
I actually would pride ourselves in a sense of like we produce well-rounded, like biblically mindful folks who want to think properly. But like one of the things you might always get challenged by is somebody coming in there who doesn't have those sorts of desires in life to be, a nerd essentially. And it's like, are they going to feel left out? Are we going to make them feel like they don't love Jesus as much as us? Yeah, exactly. Like, tell us the meaning of this word. But those are things you think about. And that's why I'm curious when it comes to these conversations, people having experiences with you. Like I had a professor in Bible college whose church ended up becoming a cult. Like, and it wasn't cultish. It was like a normal functioning kind of Pentecostal church that ended up legitimately changing doctrine and believing things it was a cult.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said, and he wasn't a believer and he was at this church. Like he hadn't really believed the gospel. And then he met some guys on the job, but he was like committed to the church. Like,
wow.
And so he met a bunch of guys at work that preached the gospel to him, and they're like, hey, have you believed this? And he was like, no. And so he did, but he said he realized that he was in a cult when he started believing. Wow. He was like, oh, dude, like, they don't doctrinally believe the stuff that I think the Bible's teaching. Here's what he said. He said when he had to leave the church, I think he was like 18, 19 years old. He said when he had to leave the church, he went to every single family at his church. Now, this wasn't a very large church. He said he went to every single family and told them he was leaving and why he was leaving, because that was the kind of pressure that was there. I was like, dude, imagine being 19 years old and like this is what it's been. Like just listening to stuff like that and going, okay, you don't. That's what you don't want to happen, right, in the church.
You have a funny.
David says, ask Nitty what sin he likes committing that caused him to leave. Oh, sheesh, man.
I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop boiling goats in their mother's milk.
Come on, man. Go away.
Every time I just walk past the halal market, I've got to buy one, and I get the milk, and I just set it up in my kitchen, and I mean, it's stovetop. Have you ever tried it stovetop? It's so sinfully delicious.
But have you? According to Ben Shapiro, that's the reason he doesn't have a cheeseburger.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I had no idea about this, by the way. But I've been reviewing the Jordan Peterson Exodus studies, kind of commenting on it on Mondays usually. And Ben Shapiro's in it, and then that passage came up, and he was like, "Oh, this is why I don't have cheeseburgers." And I was like, I've never heard that. I
This
don't think
is
that's. Hey
why
Ben, I don't
I
think
don't
that's what
have
it's talking
cheeseburgers.
about. I don't think that's what that's
No.
talking about.
When you really consider what this narrative is developing, deeply in your psyche, once you get that down, you're going to realize that you shouldn't eat cheeseburgers because God is just this
It's just hilarious, man. Like
thing where
the
that's
stuff
what the
that
best Jordan I can do right
Jewish
now.
folks do. Is it like because Dennis Prager is on that, and he was talking about how he doesn't smoke cigars on Sundays. Sorry, Saturdays, not Sundays, on the Sabbath, and predominantly because he doesn't want to light a fire because he thinks that's. I'm just like, okay,
Tell
cool.
Nick.
Yeah, hey Nick, stop him.
Keep in step with the spirit. Stop.
Well,
that
he can
on
do it
Saturday.
today. He can do it today. Today's Tuesdays,
Right,
Tuesday,
yeah.
but Friday,
Well, it's
going to
Wednesday for
Saturday.
me.
Nick, watch it. Oh yeah, because you're on the.
I'm on EST, and I'm just up late absurd amounts. Where was I going? What was I gonna say? Somebody asked me in the chat if I still believe in God or if I'm an atheist.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. I'm an atheist. I don't currently have any strong belief in a God or whatever.
So you wouldn't classify yourself as an agnostic at all.
Well, see, this is where
don't give me that nonsense internet. Oh, I'm an agnostic atheist. I just. Do you think?
Well, can I? Oh wait, no.
Right.
Let me say what I'm going to say first. I'm not going to be the turd that demands that I marry these things into one, platitude. Okay, I'm not going to play these philosophy definition games. I hate it to the core of my being. Okay. So I've talked to kids. I also do this other heinous heathen thing is that I'll go to Ohio State campus and I have a whiteboard and it says, it's best to be an atheist. Let's chat. Right. And I do that, but I do that to be audacious and get people to talk to me about what they believe and why. And no, yeah, you can't in private spaces.
What?
Yeah, it's illegal.
Peter Boghossian does it all the time.
Well, he does it in like a park.
No, man, he's on campuses.
Well, that's the public space of the campus. I'm in a Panera Bread, and I work.
Oh, okay. Leave it for the socialists to tell you on a campus. Here's where you can openly speak. Whatever.
Right. Anyway, I do that to talk about what we believe and why, and to show. I like to say that to put a smile to atheism. Right. Mm-hmm. The other thing is when they ask me, okay, you said it's best to be an atheist. Like, what do you mean? I'll say that I'm an atheist with respect to all God claims that I've been presented, but I can never disprove a deity beyond them, like a proof creator universe creator deity. He's like, I made the stuff, see you later. Or another one who's like, I made the stuff, I'm so proud of it, but all I'm going to do is look at it, right? It's going to be like my Legos over there. I made the stuff, and all I do is look at it. Or another one who's like, I set up this disaster machine and everything's going to explode. Goodbye. Like, I don't know. Like, we don't know if that God exists or doesn't exist. And I think that's fair, right? Like, I don't think that's, mean or uncharitable. And I think it's reasonable with like the limits of my knowledge, right? Because a God like that could exist. And how could you falsify any three of those? You just can't. Right. And so it's like, right. Well, if you believe in the evidence of another God or religious system, of course you can, because that, what you've accepted as true precludes you from accepting the existence of any kind of deity like that, because then like the God.
Yeah, you're arguing from your worldview. Right? I mean, that's a bit different. If somebody's like, well, God could be evil demon or something like that. I just very simply would say to that that God, then that entity wouldn't be sufficiently called God. Give it another name. That's a possibility.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that God is like an interaction based, like what we normally think of as a demon God or something like that. Sure. Right? That kind of demon God belief is not what I'm talking about. Okay. It's more like I just set up the Rube Goldberg death trap, and I'm gonna leave it to go. Like, okay. But David, yes, I can't falsify deism. I wouldn't actually say that I can definitively falsify all religions. I think there's some that falsify themselves because the data just, from our lived experience or, scientific data, um, you know, observations of the universe, like just falsify them flat out, right?
Like,
If
do you have an
you
example
have
of
to
something like that you're thinking?
Yeah, sure, like Mormonism and
Okay.
anachronisms in the Book of Mormon. Like, we can verify through the historical and archaeological record that this is full of crap. Right?
Yeah.
Let alone the documents we have from Joseph Smith himself, his arrest records, and all that stuff. Like, that's just one way to provide some falsification criteria. It
Yeah.
makes a claim, and we have more than sufficient evidence to reject it, right? I think Islam has like enough inconsistencies within its own narrative of its history to give you sufficient reason to doubt the veracity of its original claims.
Well, it makes too big of claims.
Right. And then there's like goofy verses in the Quran that just have like no great apologetics for him. Thanks, David Wood. So yeah, because when I was a Christian, I watched David Wood. I still do sometimes, but for different reasons.
He's a weirdo.
He is an AP, like he hangs out with AP.
Yeah, I don't know why he's hanging out with that Turk.
But yeah,
I've said that to them, to their faces.
I know, that's funny. What can I do?
He said, I respect that. Beric said, I respect that answer. I believe in God, but I still find your point of view interesting, and you do have a sense of humility.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that the way I talk about it it is a Weasley way to get out of the whole like, oh, you just don't know what those terms mean. Oh, how dare you? Like, it's just like, get out of here. I hate that stuff.
Yeah, for me, it's most atheists I've come across whenever they do the whole atheism, I'm an agnostic atheist kind of conversation. All they're trying to do is shift the burden of proof. They're not actually taking a position. They just don't want to give any, answers or any reasons. Again, that's my experience. And
sure.
And for me, it's like, you don't have to do that, bro. Like, you can just say, I don't want to give you answers. Like, you give me, like, convince me. Like, that's okay. Like, you might be a jerk about it, but like, don't try to redefine words that people have been using within a specific context of a conversation. And then now you just like try to flip it upside down and be like, I got you. I don't have any burden of proof. You do it,
Yeah, I hate that. It drives me crazy too. So if you ever think I'm being dishonest or like Weasley, just be like, stop it, Nitty. And I'll be like, okay. I'll answer your question, yes or no.
Yeah, I've just generally had good conversation. I've been blessed, I should say this. And in regards to the non-believers that are on my channel, I'm attracting a certain kind of non-believer, and I like it because they're people I can actually have a normal conversation with. And I love the fact that like JR's, right, Jerome's here, and Jerome will say things like, dude, this is an apologetics channel. You guys just shifted and you're talking about soccer for the next like 40 minutes. I'm like, yes, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what you're going to get if you're hanging out with me. It's going to be like a theology conversation and a philosophy. Those are the sorts of conversations I have with my kids. And
that happens in my wacky funhouse land too, where I'm
be
critical and goofy about some theistic stuff. And I'm sorry if it's offensive, but like, once again, don't take me too seriously. I'm not aiming for that on my channel. Most of it's cathartic, and then people come and hang out. We talk about politics, we talk about movies, like, yeah, we're regular people too.
Yeah. So but again, like I was listening to a specific conversation today earlier, and I couldn't get I fast forwarded, I skipped it around, and people were yelling at each other, and it was just like, I got you, you can't say anything. And I was like, maybe I'm like too old, I don't know. Like, I just like the little thing. I'm just like, leave me alone.
Grow up.
My wife likes to remind me that I'm turning into old grumpy man. But I'm not.
Yeah, internet pissing contests aren't really that fun.
I'm not interested in those things, man. The older I'm getting, I'm really not interested in it. Partly because I'm also I have and I also pay attention to really intelligent people that disagree with me, and I respect them. You know what? Very interesting thing. A guy I don't like very much is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Just because like sometimes
I
he
don't
just
like him either.
But the other day I watched a video from him and I was like, dude, yes, you tell him. And it's he's basically talking about the guys that went to the moon or went to space, what like in the 70s. And he was like, when they were there, I guess one of the first things they did was they read out of Genesis. Right? And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So when this happened, this lady who's the head of the American Atheists or whatever like that, ended up suing the U.S. government for like religious stuff. And then deGrasse Tyson said, wait, hang on here. He said, if I was there, I would have told her, were you the one that got like strapped to a rocket and shot up into space at and he gives his scientific data as to how fast they were traveling and like how dangerous that thing was. And he's like, and if the answer to that question is no, I would just tell you to shut the F up because these guys risk their life. I think they have the right to read from the Bible. And you're sitting here, and it's that sort of thing where you kind of go, I don't know, man. I'm just like really not interested in sitting there and yelling over each other. Like, I want to present an argument and then we can look at the arguments and whether it's valid or not. Keanu said, what?
Sure.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is the GOAT. Have fun, bro.
Oh, no. He's gone now.
Come on, bro. Sometimes I've grown to like him a lot more. Good thing that Nitty is one of the very few people that I trust to talk to Arthur properly. And he's the one who I've managed to find here. Convenient. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I love how he just uses that word convenient in various ways.
He's fun.
David says, Nitty, do you think that proving the existence of general theism, a god of any kind, is important before looking at the specific claims of religions? That's a good question.
I actually don't think so. Because I'm stepping in a time machine of myself, okay? When I first started checking out Christianity and being involved with Christians, I was still not 100% sold out on, an omni God of any kind, right? Or an omnibenevolent God of any kind. What started to change my mind were the claims of Christianity themselves, and and some of it was the general case that was being presented to me in favor of it, and the influence of the people around me as the evidence of the truth of Christianity. And it was those things that are the claims of Christianity that I found convincing. And then I began to develop I accepted Jesus' sacrifice for my sins and stuff like that. And then the rest of my theology built back out around that. So I think it's very possible that if you're compelled by the evidence for particular claims, or you're just, credulous enough to just believe a claim, then you might follow the entailments of that claim or the rest of that belief system. I mean, QAnon does it. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying that, if you find some evidence related to a belief system compelling, then it's not unheard of for you to, go back and subscribe to the rest of it. Right.
Yeah. I would agree generally with what you said. I just don't think that our thinking and our beliefs are as neat as we would like them to be.
Oh, No.
or we think that they are in regards to.
I'm
Like
totally rational every moment of the day, all the
yeah,
time.
I'm a computer. You know,
Beep bop boop boop.
yeah, that would be a major problem. My wife already thinks I need more emotion. I always
I'll
tell
send you
people,
some of mine.
you know, the irony is that I'm very
Bless
emotional.
him, Lord, with my emotion.
No, I am very, very emotional, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
But I just don't wear them on my sleeves.
Okay.
The way people will know how emotional I am is two things. They play soccer with me or they watch soccer with me. They'll know how emotional I am.
Okay.
But
yeah, all right.
Yeah, you know, we don't formulate beliefs in that way. So, like, I've pondered being an atheist more after I became a Christian than before that.
Yeah.
Before I was a Christian, I just thought atheism was stupid. And I'd never even thought to look at serious claims of atheism. And I've regularly told people, but I was practically an atheist. The way I lived my life, like God didn't matter to any decision I made. It was lots of religiosity, but belief-wise, I've always believed like there's a God. After I became a Christian, I've looked at the most serious claims of atheism, or the best atheists that are out there. I've tried to look at their arguments and say, okay, are these convincing or not? And so you kind of try to backtrack, and then even like reevaluating beliefs that you hold to. For folks who are interested in this, you might want to look at something called a noetic structure, which is the sum total of all your beliefs, and this is generally in the philosophy, in epistemology, and it has to do with your beliefs plus the reasons for your beliefs and how those things kind of change. So I always use this example. Suppose I became a Christian because somebody told me, if you become a Christian, you won't go to hell. Like, that's it, right? I was like, and I was, say, 17 years old, and I was like, I really don't want to go to hell. Cool. I become a Christian. 8 years later, say I change my theological view to something like a Christian universalism. Okay, so hell
like
doesn't exist
really
anymore. But
yeah.
let's just say, like hell doesn't exist, right? That doesn't mean I give up Christianity because that's the reason I became a Christian. That's just not how beliefs work, right? I now, partly why, because most likely at that point I would have developed other reasons why I should be a Christian.
Right.
And so therefore, the reason why I became a Christian versus the reason why I'm currently a Christian are very different. Plus, it would commit the genetic fallacy to claim that the reason why somebody became a Christian means that means that Christianity is not true. People could believe right stuff for all sorts of random crazy stuff. So again, it's messy. Like, our beliefs are very, very messy. Ideally, you could sit there with like a very robotic individual. And I've had these sort of conversations. Like, I've sat with people and said, okay, where are you? And they've told me where they are. Like, okay, what you want to do is consider like the most fundamental thing of this conversation, which is there a God in the first place? And cool, here's four things you want to think about. But again, not everyone's there. Like, there's people I've talked to, I sit with them and I'm like, do you think that there is no God? They're like, no, I think that's stupid. I think there's a God. Like, I'm just not sure which religion is true. And so that conversation looks differently. And you always want to be honest with the evidence that you present, right? Like, you're not like, haha, let me take advantage of this guy. Don't do that. That's weird. I've given atheists good arguments for atheism, and they've been like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Like,
let me keep that one. Oh, by the way,
I've literally told people that. I'm like, use it because it's better than the nonsense you just told me.
Oh my goodness. I'm going back for a second about the belief in the resurrection. In the book of Acts, did people believe in Yahweh or the Father before, or a singular deity before they converted to Christianity?
Oh, I have no issues with henotheism, so.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that as Scripture presents it, like the Gentiles that converted,
correct,
they didn't like change. Like, it's not indicated that they changed to monotheism because
Yeah,
they accepted Christ.
most likely not immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I just backed it up with scripture, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, we definitely see a presentation in Acts 17 where Paul very clearly teaches them that all these other gods don't exist.
Right.
But it would not be problematic at all because it kind of logically follows, right? So suppose someone is a pagan, and I mean that in the ancient sense of the word.
Yeah.
And believes in many gods, and here you are, you go to them, you present Jesus, and they're like, yeah, I want to follow Jesus, I want to believe in Jesus. And you go, okay, cool, here's what Christianity says, and here are the claims. And then it logically follows that all these other gods that they believe in,
Right,
they shouldn't believe in. And I think there's references to this in the writings of Paul. For example, when he talks about idols, he says, we really know that they don't really exist.
Yeah.
You know?
For there are many lords, there are many gods, but there's only one, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can agree with that if God exists and the resurrection of Christ is yeah, sure. Like, you know.
But I think that you argued for that. That's what we were saying. We were talking about like some stuff logically follow. Like if you believe in the resurrection of Jesus,
well, no,
it makes
he's
sense.
saying it the other way. That if you think God exists, then the resurrection is also possible, right? It just depends on where you are in your journey too. Like,
yeah, your starting point matters.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. But I don't. The original question, I don't think that one, the belief in the God of the Bible, is required at the outs, or everything about the God of the Bible is required to initially believe that Christianity is true.
Yeah, I highly doubt people even in the Bible. Like let's just consider Abraham. I like thinking about Abraham. Like, and if we were to grant everything that we can, like Abraham has an experience with Yahweh. He doesn't call him Yahweh. Like it's the God who created the heavens and the earth. And this deity, this God who created the heavens and the earth, tells him to do a bunch of stuff. Like, did Abraham give up all these other beliefs that he potentially would have had? Probably not. And this is why I'm talking about henotheism. And even the Israelites coming out of Egypt, like look at the way people speak in regards to, in their minds, I'm not talking about the reality of these things existing, but in their minds, these things existed and they were real, right? Mm-hmm. So why would, let's just say, Elijah challenge the prophets of Baal the way he does? Well, because the prophets of Baal actually believe Baal exists, right? And now, in the midst of that, I mean, that whole scene is hilarious to me. But
oh yeah, that's one of my favorite stories because Elijah's like, "What is? Yeah, is he taking a?
Yeah, he's taking a dump. He says,
"I'm glad that you know exactly where I was going."
Yeah, because he's like, yell louder. He might be in the bathroom. He's preoccupied. But the point of that, you could say that Elijah is showing them that Baal is nothing, but it's probably better argued that what Elijah is showing them is Yahweh is stronger than Baal. And so therefore, Baal shouldn't have your commitment. It makes no sense. In the biblical narrative, it makes no sense to worship all these other things rather than Yahweh, because Yahweh is the creator of all other things. So essentially, it's an argument as to why worship the creation instead of the creator, because all these other deities were a part of creation when you look at the Canaanite or the Egyptian kind of. This is why the plagues in Egypt are fascinating to study in regards to their particular.
Do you think of them as subversions of the Egyptian gods?
I think so. I think that's clear as day. Yeah, I actually think Genesis 1 is written that way as well. So I look at Genesis 1 as a polemic as well. The stuff that God is creating are all things people worshipped in the ancient world. It goes, okay, here's the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's the way we're introduced to God in the beginning, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's all we know about him. And then the name gets, and then we have more revelation about God that he gives. But I don't know whether they went around saying, okay, strict monotheism, and then, we're going to do this like in this very linear kind of setting. It's just not. it gets argued for through a story, through history, right? So the psalmist will I love passages that are written like this because it's God, you're faithful. And it doesn't stay there. It's not like, oh, you're faithful. It's God, you're faithful because you brought us out of Egypt. So they fall back on this historical event, and then the faithfulness of God is seen in that. So it's not like, oh, let's sit there and like philosophically consider whether like God's faithfulness is a essential property or an accidental property.
Yes.
Right? Like,
oh my goodness.
I think those are great things. I love doing those things. I think they're necessary. Philosophical theology is necessary. But that's just not the way and the reality of human beings actually processing this information on the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm curious.
That's very good.
With your views about the interactions of, say, like Genesis or the plagues in Egypt as being these kind of statements against, those deities or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how do you differentiate that being a divine measure of the narrative or the purpose of the narrative versus a human purpose of that narrative?
Oh, like the literary kind of arguments that would go for it? Is that, am I understanding?
I'm not
right?
even don't think I'm going towards documentary hypothesis.
No, that's not. I'm not. I'm saying like, because I think there is some of that. So Job is probably written so I would say like Job is a true story that would have happened to someone, but there's aspects of the story that are made up for symmetry and poetry, but it's wisdom literature, like in regards to calamity happens to this person, and the way the story's told. I would look at the details of the story. Okay. So I want to see kind of the claims within the story, and is that story being told the way, say, the author is kind of reflecting on it and telling it, or is it like being plainly told to us in its kind of historical setting? So earlier today we did a Bible study for my Patreon folks through Ecclesiastes, and so one of the things is like the book of Ecclesiastes has these very like insane statements in there where it's like, what happens to a man when he dies? Who knows? Right? Like, he'll be like, who knows? Does he ascend up, or does he go down to where all the other animals go? Like, for me, that's an authorial, right? The author is kind of communicating this point, right. And I'm not taking that as like a doctrinal point about souls and sleep and whatever, like some people do. It's because he makes really crazy theologically like obtuse statements. Like, God has created this lot for you and you're going to suffer. Like, it's like he seems very frustrated with God. And he makes these statements, right? And it's the sort of stuff I think Habakkuk does, where he's like, where are you? You don't care about us. Look, all these people are killing us. Like, I think these are normal things that people say. Where, say, in Exodus, when these plagues are happening, it's just being told to us that these are things that are happening. And because of the nature of things happening and our disconnect from the culture, we sort of don't see. We're like, oh, look, frogs, It's like, we don't understand that there's a serious intent as to why they're frogs and not something else, right? Like, not lizards.
Right.
And so that's the way that I would distinguish between those things in regards to the author actually doing that. Now, if I want to be very skeptical and stuff, you can always go back and say, well, this stuff really didn't happen and they're doing it it's just a literary point being made towards, and that's fine. People can argue for that. But I think now they are going outside of the claims of the text. Their worldview is already set up, and then they're reading that into the text. Like, the natural reading of the text seems to suggest to me that the people in the text or the writers of the text actually think this stuff is happening. Like, historically taking place?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's really hard. I think, I guess my humble take is that stepping into the psychology of an ancient author is very difficult unless they themselves say, like, I witnessed this plague in Egypt and I was really happy about it. And it's
Yeah.
in the first person, right? Or like, or I was very confused. Like the Pauline letters are, they have first person stuff,
Correct.
and he's recounting his own experience and giving his emotions and how those things are affecting him. So I think it's reasonable for us to make an evaluation of like his mood states, his personality, and things like that. But I don't know how we would determine the level of confidence the author has in the historicity of what they're writing for like those texts in particular, right? Or if that even matters to them, right?
Yeah.
And then we're just stuck with people as viewing these as authoritatively and keeping them, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand it. I would just say, so let's just say there's the 10 plagues. There's all these plagues happening, and then one of them happens to be, whatever the
evidenced by something in Egypt. Let's go.
Like that? One of the, Pharaoh's son dies, and it's like, well, that's the next incarnate king, and he's seen as a god, and so on and so forth. If it's one, then I wouldn't hold that strongly at all. I'd say, well, it's conjecture. It could be, maybe, I'm not very sure. When it's kind of repeated and every single one of them are that. And there's names for them, right? Like, so whether with the plagues or with the Genesis account, you're seeing chaos, order, these sorts of things. Yeah. You go, okay, like that caught my attention. And then it's like, oh, there's another thing that just happened. Oh, okay, it's getting a bit weird. And so the repetition of it, I think, is literally, at least, it suggests that was intended to be the case. Now, considering that that divine challenges are a normal thing in the ancient world, right? That even magnifies that point. So, biblically speaking, one of the things that is, and I think this is like as obvious as could be, it's when the Philistines beat the Israelites, and then they take the Ark of the Covenant to their temple, and they put it in their temple, and they wake up in the morning, and their God has fallen face first in front of it, and it's like, okay, so why is that significant? Well, because to take someone else's religious items into your temple meant you conquered them, and here's the reversal of that, right? And then the rest of the story also. Well, the rest of the story suggests that too, because it ends up at some like random guy's house that like prospers, and they're like, wait, hang on, so the entire story that's being told has that notion that Yahweh's in control. Like, it could seem like the Philistines actually conquered Israel, but the way the text is going is that God is actually handing his people over for disobedience, and then nobody could really beat him. Definitely not these false idols. And that is shown in the idol falling before it being moved to someone else's house. And I think it's in that story where they like accidentally drop it and a couple of guys try to catch it and they die. Like, there's a whole narrative to that. Uzzah. To do that, don't want to be that guy, right? I don't have an answer for that. So,
well, actually, I explained that to an atheist the other day, that what the part of the reason that that person died from touching the ark was because it would be an improper handling against the Levitical law, and they weren't trying to carry it with the proper posts through the rings, like the golden rings.
Yeah, and it's not even the right people that are trying to do it. Like, there's specific people.
Yeah.
But my issue is just, the punishment seems a bit harsh. But
I know, I agree. But
yeah. So, it could be said that anytime those things are violated, it is punishable by death. So these are actually expected sort of things.
Sure.
But yeah.
I just find it fascinating. Like let's say now this is kind of a loaded question though, because now you know what I'm about to do, maybe, right?
Maybe, I don't know.
There's a parody argument to this, right? So what if there was like a, an ancient Chinese text, right? And we currently know like all the dynasties from like 500 BC to like 1400 Common Era, okay? So we know all that, right? But there's this like, 500 BC ancient Chinese text, and we find it, and it makes a claim that there's only one God, and that God is awesome, but it's got a completely different name, right? And it has no interest in like sacrifices, idols, anything like that. But in that text, that God is destroying all kinds of like water dragons that people believed are real, or like is crushing a rival emperor through like a plague or something like that. And then you find Chinese traditions later built on that text. Now, what I feel like I'm hearing from you is that the correlation of the historical stuff about Egypt that we know, and the precision that the text has to all of that, lends credibility to it being supernatural, or as if like there's more truth to the spiritual claims of it because of that precision.
But no, I'm more talking about like how to understand the text, regardless whether.
Okay.
So I kind of dealt with this when I was on Pine Creek
But do you
last
get
time.
why I'm asking that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. This is a normal question. I think it's a natural question that comes up, and I always want to distinguish between, like, in regards to my claims.
Okay.
So what I'm talking about is the way to correctly understand the text, as opposed to whether the text is actually portraying true events.
Okay. All right.
So
I get it now.
we need to distinguish between those things. So if somebody comes up and says something like, I am thinking about the creation kind of the creation debate that Christians have.
Or how Jordan Peterson reads the Bible.
Correct. Right? Yes, absolutely. Right?
I hated that as a Christian. He made me so mad.
So I actually, dude, I'm telling you, like, I'm on, like, we just finished episode 15 of those Exodus studies. And
how do you do it? Are you in hell right now? Do I need to ask Jesus to get you out?
Some of them are a lot better. I appreciate the fact that Oz Guinness is there, because he'll say stuff that I think will bring to a certain kind of balance, because some of them are like, they'll stop talking about the text and for 40 minutes talk about like the negative effects of your parents. And like, I'm just like, okay, what are they going? And I get what they're doing. I get what's going on, but it's just not the way I would study the Bible. And I don't think that's the correct way of studying the Bible.
So yeah, you're talking about how we should understand the text, not that those things are evidence of the truth of the text.
Correct. Now, I do think that the earliest audience would have looked at those things and said, yeah, these are historical events.
They were like,
or at the very least, representing historical events. I think they would have seen, I think they would have looked at Job and said, hey, it's weird, right? Like, he, at the end of his life, he ends up having, like, I don't know, like 10 times the amount of kids that he originally had. Like if you consider that, these are people that know how to have kids. They probably all gave birth at home. They know how children are made. And they know at what age is the best time to make kids. And they were like, wait, how many years was that? How old were his kids? I mean, his kids are old enough to be partying and stuff, so that means he's probably older. Like, people are rational. They probably would have seen this as a literary kind of
it's
exaggeration of sorts.
Yeah, it's a way for them to understand their relationship between God and suffering.
Yeah, and everything, again, this is the whole literal, not literal kind of conversation that people have.
I actually watched you do a short on that.
Yeah, that's the one that has been getting a funny amount of attention to that. And it's funny because I'm not saying anything
outlandish. Yeah,
I'm not. Like, you could be the most liberal Bible scholar and amen what I said in there.
Yeah, they'd be
like, understand the Bible literally. That's all I'm saying. even if you think the stories didn't happen, it still makes sense to view that story the way I'm telling you to view it, right? If let's just say that
I try to myself. Like I don't like I'm not an R and Ra type person where it's like, oh, it's all fable and it's worthless.
oh
Well,
gosh,
he's not quite like that anymore. He's actually doing Blasphemer Bible study. But anyway,
he's doing what?
um, he does Blasphemers Bible study
I have
like
no
every
idea what that
week.
is.
So he gets like a couple of Jewish gentlemen, some ex-Christians, and Lance from Milwaukee Atheists, and they pull up like an absurd amount of commentaries, and then they go through the text, and they obviously they kind of caricature some of the
Yeah.
text because it's R and Ra, and his wife Lilith. But
Her name
Lance
is her
to
name
do,
actually Lilith?
that's what she goes by.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
right.
sure that's his wife.
The funny thing is
Anyway.
that Armenians actually name like Lilith is an actual name we name our daughters.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
wouldn't, but
Yeah. Well, anyway, but Lance of Milwaukee Atheists does a good job, and they actually use Christian commentaries
okay.
too to try and understand and work with the text. And then they give P Town a hard time because he's a young Earth creationist. So
That's yeah. So again, that's the thing is like when it comes to the creation debate. For me, I think the early audience, like it could have those implications, but I think the earliest
the church
audience,
fathers believed the Earth was young. So
well, some
then
of
we
them
should all
did, some of them don't.
very few. I actually looked this up for a
Sure,
little bit,
yeah.
and the majority were still young Earth-ish, and there were a couple who were like, "Quit it."
yeah. Like, yeah, the fact that here's the funny thing about like these historical conversations is that we're working with the literature we have from these people. For all we know, there could be there were a lot of other church fathers, and we just don't have their literature because and a number of them we know by name, and the only evidence we have is from other people quoting them. But at least we know for sure there was a conversation being had where people were like, "No, we shouldn't take that all literally, right?" Or it's not young; it could have been thousands of years. And so, if the conversation's happening, that means the conversation's not new. It means the accusation that the reason why let's just say somebody is, some young earthers like to argue this way, where they're like, oh, you guys are only arguing for this because of, evolutionary teaching in recent times. And it's like, no, there are church fathers who are arguing for this, and they're way before any of that stuff. So, but again, if you're looking at that text and the way I look at it, if I'm looking at it as the God of the Jews is the creator of the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
And he created everything the Egyptians are worshiping. To me, that being the intent of the text and that being the way you're supposed to properly understand the text, is a lot homier, let me put it that way, in regards to its original audience. It fits within their context, rather than kind of trying to figure out why there is no sunlight but vegetation growing. I'm just like, I highly doubt these guys coming out of Egypt.
To work with it that way.
Huh?
It gets really hard to work with it that way. And then you get like the atheist YouTube channels are like, how is there darkness and plants growing?
Yeah. And look, there's people
little
try
effort made to get through.
People try to understand it and stuff, and I really don't care what the atheist channels are saying. That's not my predominant concern as to what an atheist is saying about any of this stuff. I'm sitting there and saying, is an Israelite that's coming out of Egypt in the Exodus looking at this text and saying, how is that growing in darkness? Or are they saying, like, there's a God that the Egyptians were worshiping, and we know what that God is because we know him by name because we've been there for 400 years. And it's being created. It's got an origin story, and our God is the one bringing it into existence. Like, I think that's a lot more of a powerful, what I would say, it has a lot more explanatory power than the other one. So again, like, it's not always that easy, and it's not always that simple, because some of it is like you have to know background information. You have to know cultural information.
Oh yeah. Otherwise, you just lose a lot of the value
Yeah.
of what that text is saying and why it was written. Sure, like that's why I find it fascinating still, and I'm never gonna
Because it's
stop
good
like
literature.
learning things about it.
Because it's good
Yeah,
literature.
exactly.
It really
I'm
is.
not
And
this person who's like, it's written by goat herders. Like, hell no, it wasn't.
yeah. Look, man, if goat herders could write literature like that, like
What
we
am I
got,
doing with my life?
like we got a lot of learning to do, my friend. Right? Like if you look at the kind of parallelism and just beautiful structuring of Hebrew poetry and stuff,
Yeah.
it's like cool. Yeah, I'm all day. Goat herders had a lot of time on their hands in the
And
desert.
JR knows that I feel this way.
No, I know, and I think he's seen that. I mean, we try to the best of our abilities, at least here, kind of present that, regardless. Again, even if somebody doesn't believe it's the word of God, I think to go the other way and say, "Oh, it's just nonsense" or something. It's like you're just being really fake and going out of your way. So here's an example, like in Daniel, right? Where Nebuchadnezzar's son, right? I forget his name, Belshazzar.
Yeah.
So he brings out the elements.
He has the party, and then the Mene Tekel or whatever.
Yeah. So so the writing on the wall. Hey guys, look at that. That terminology's got a biblical origin to it. You're welcome, folks. Next time you say the writing is on the wall. But why is that so crazy? Like, why is this guy killed by God? It's very obviously the case for doing what he did. Well, it's because he's violating holy space that is Yahweh's, and they're getting drunk out of all the cups and stuff like that. He's showing like Babylonian ownership of these things, and God's telling him,
"Give it back, yo."
Well, God's telling him, "You don't own anything, man. Like I can kill you," and he does. Yeah. But the same thing happens to Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar, in a different sense, Nebuchadnezzar gets up and says, "Look at all this stuff I've created with my hands," and then God says, kind of gave that stuff to you. You're going to become like an animal till you actually like figure that out. Yeah. And again, the ideology there again is divine kind of human conflict. Every time human beings try to elevate themselves, it's very, isn't it ironic that in both those situations, they're in, here you go, folks, Babylon. Right? So it's the whole Babel story again, right? Like where they try to elevate themselves to be equal with God, and then God says, and it goes along with Old Testament passages like Yahweh raises up whomever he will raise up and puts down whoever he wants to put down.
Yeah, and that's where the prophets, draw upon. It depends on how you view the prophets too. Like, is that literature ex avantu, or is it, actually future focused, right? Mm-hmm. But either way, the prophets are very concerned with using their interaction or experience with Babylon to make their point, right?
Yes.
Or to speak on behalf of God of what those events could still mean, but in a different way, right? If you view it as prophetic, then it means that those interactions with Babylon are an archetype of something future in God's plan.
Correct. Yeah, and it's not always the case where it's the one or the other, right? It could be, sure. And I think we see this dualistic weird thing of, like even the New Testament when it talks about the Antichrist. I know Christians get hung up on this quite a bit, but John says something like, "Well, there are many Antichrists." It's like,
and what is that? 1 John?
Yeah, and there's one. He talks about this one to come or whatever like that, but there are currently Antichrist, and it's very interesting that we kind of ignore that. Huh?
I said maybe I'm one.
Oh,
I'm the demon on the stream.
Well, your last name is Fitsit, but
right. I was always worried about.
I really want to know how the Greeks would pronounce your last name.
Me too. Call them.
Yeah, I should have some demon friends. I should have some Greek.
Well, the interesting thing is actually I did like an ancestry.com thing, and like the name is from my dad's side, and it's actually very hard for me to get behind the their Ellis Island record. Like I can't go any further than that.
Yeah, because it's they arrived here and they were like, here's a name. They did this to Armenians quite a bit. Yeah, because it's the Godfather thing, right? Like it's like, what's your name? And they can't say his name. And they're like, where are you from? Corleone. Okay, Corleone. Go away. You know.
It was probably something like that. Like, yeah, I like to say it as Ellis Iowan is probably a little bit racist. Like, let's be honest here.
Everybody was.
And like my Polish ancestry, their last name was Matusewicz. Oof. And they just shortened that to mates. So like,
Americans have always been bad when it comes to pronunciations, man.
Oh yeah.
So just for all my ethnic friends, don't ever care about how an American will pronounce the name of your children. Name them the most difficult names in your original language you can possibly do. Let them deal with it. And whenever, because I get pushed back quite a bit.
Laugh.
You know, dude, like my kids' names are very Armenian names. And you know, people will struggle with them. I see them struggling with it. And then I got Armenians who were telling me, well, people are going to struggle with their names. And then they're not even that crazy. But I'm like, I don't care. Really? People struggled with my name. And it's an English name.
Arthur.
Like that's the Eastern European way. Yeah, that's the way my mom says it. But right, like Arthur is a British name. Like, and I had people just because there was no H in there, and they're not cultured to understand that Eastern Europeans don't have ths. This th stuff is weird to them. They either say a th or a t, and they would, can we call you Art? And I've told teachers, no, you may not call me Art. My name is Arthur. Just call me Arthur. You could ask me, hey, is it okay if I call you Arthur instead of all the weird variants? I've heard you say it really good. I've had teachers actually tell me, are we calling you
Nick
Arthur?
Helped me out
is it
this.
Arthur? No, it's not Arthur. So I'm just, I was like, I don't care. I'm going to name them Armenian names. Let them deal with it. Whatever. Because of that stuff. And it's so much that people came to this country and they couldn't pronounce it. And I get it. They couldn't pronounce things. And the British also, is our British friend in here? Is JR in here? Jerome's in here. We're going to have a whole conversation about aluminium and aluminum.
Yeah, I have an extensive British heritage, actually, on my grandmother's side. It goes back pretty far. One of the like ancient cousins I have, like ancient, like 2 centuries ago, was like accused of witchcraft and killed for that.
It must be genetic.
No wonder. Oh no, it's generational sin. What are we gonna do, Arthur?
Oh man, I thought you were gonna go like the the Hebrew Israelite route.
Oh no. It's an ancient British tribe.
Oh man, yeah, it was so weird.
Circle it back around.
You should have seen them interacting with me. Do you know who Anthony Rogers is? I've seen him on YouTube. He's got a nice beard. He's a pastor, Calvinist Reform guy. Really smart. But he is, he's Italian, I believe. But me and him, we're ethnically ambiguous. So to the unsuspecting. So we hit up the Hebrew Israelites together, and they didn't know what to do with us. They're like, "Where are you guys from?" And they're trying to place us in their minds.
They're trying to,
Well, they knew where Italy was. They just didn't know where Armenia was. And then they were making claims that every nation on earth has enslaved black people. And I told them that's not true. Armenians have never enslaved black people. And he's like, no, you guys must have. You guys must have.
Skin,
I know you're dumb, bro.
You're like, you're the oppressor,
Yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah. It's funny. Oh man. Okay, hey guys, it's 12:01.
Yeah, it's 3 here.
Nick, thank you so much, man. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
This has been a really fun conversation. Do you have any
special way you close down your show? I do.
What do you do?
I say that's nitty.
Oh,
we don't have
to
do that.
That is no, I'm boring, dude. Mine's like, see you next time. God bless you guys.
Okay.
That just reminded me of John McCrae, and Next time somebody asks you, what do you mean? My kids love that, man. Every time I watch a John McCrae thing, I hear they're not even near me, and I'll hear like one of my kids go like, what do you mean? They just...
I remember that, yeah. It stuck with me too. It's like, next time someone asks you, say, what do you mean?
Jerome says, I'm still here, don't worry. Don't ask why I'm still awake, though. Well, I'm just going to say it's because you're very excited that Arsenal won their game, that they almost tied Luton. And I was really, really hoping they would have tied Luton because tomorrow Liverpool's got a game, and I was hoping we'd jump into first place. But now we got to win that to stay in second. You're far from boring, Art. That is not true. I know how boring I am, man. Stop lying to me.
Well, this was fun. Boring. Thank you for letting me on.
I appreciate it.
So yeah, I mean, we disagree on things, and I had a great time.
Hey, look, it's always great talking to people who know what they're talking about, right? And the disagreements are gonna be there. Yeah, and I disagree with my Christian brothers all the time. But I think there's a way we disagree. I think there's we're actually disagreeing on stuff that we should be disagreeing upon, not stuff that we just want to randomly make up and be like, nah, I just don't agree with you. You don't know what you're talking about. You're stupid. Not that kind of stuff, right? We don't want that. I want this channel to be a place where people can genuinely be able to watch a 3.5 hour stream and not be like, I'm so annoyed with that one guy because he just doesn't seem like he's listening to a word that the other person's saying. Because then those aren't conversations, and we're not interested in that. So I appreciate you calling in.
Appreciated. Yeah, and don't subscribe to me. I'm completely not serious, and I blaspheme all the time. Don't do it.
So here's the thing. I actually subscribe to stuff that I really want to watch.
Sure, yeah.
And sometimes I feel like I'm offending people because I don't subscribe to their stuff because I'm like, I'm not really interested in watching this. I probably wouldn't.
But I will post that we hung out.
I'm going to tag you in this video. So
okay, that's great.
Yeah. We'll do.
Just a warning to your viewers. If you come to my land, you've been warned.
Literally, he's got a land behind him. He's created from Legos. Then he goes and says there's no God.
I mean, look at all this created stuff. Doesn't it tell you?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good argument.
Look at the Lego trees.
Okay. I'm going to say good night to you. Good morning, because it's 3 a.m. Where you're at.
Yeah.
Go sleep, my guy. See you. Good meeting you.
Artur.
Good meeting you.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
Well, folks, look at that. We went from having a conversation with a Christian about theology and Paul and whether he wrote that or didn't, and all sorts of fun sprinkled in between that. Got to mess around with our camera view. Look at that. We might keep this. We might play around with this. We don't know. I just got to get the colors right. And then we had Nick call in. 2 Nicks today. And what a respectful, fun, enjoyable conversation we had, man. We got to laugh, agree, disagree. And generally, I think for those of you guys who are watching, I always want that to be a model of sorts for the conversation you get to have with your friends and family members who disagree with you, especially for the Christians, but also for the non-Christians as well. With all that said, I'm going to go to bed. God bless you guys. Take care. I might continue doing these Tuesday night streams like this. I've really enjoyed it. See you guys hopefully tomorrow.